Story 1. For our 5th anniversary, my girlfriend gave me a gym membership because you've really let yourself go. I was planning to propose to her that night. Instead, I pulled the box out of my jacket, watched her face light up with excitement, then opened the box, took the ring out, and handed her the empty box. Look, I need to tell someone about this, and since my friends think I'm a psychopath and my family won't return my calls, you're going to hear the whole twisted thing. What I did to Sarah on our 5th anniversary wasn't planned, not exactly, but when she handed me that gym membership with that smug little smile, something inside me just snapped. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. Sarah and I had been together since college. 5 years of what I thought was genuine love, the kind where you actually picture growing old together, where you start unconsciously saying we instead of I when making plans. She was everything I thought I wanted, brilliant, ambitious, gorgeous in that effortless way that made other guys hate me a little. I'd been carrying the engagement ring around for 3 weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. Our anniversary was on a Thursday, which sounds unromantic, but that's when we'd first kissed back in our dorm hallway, so it meant something. I'd made reservations at Chez Laurent, this impossibly expensive French place where you need to book 2 months in advance and the waiters look at you like you're personally insulting their ancestors if you mispronounce anything. I picked her up at 7 sharp. She was wearing this midnight blue dress that hugged her curves perfectly, her dark hair swept up in some complicated style that probably took an hour. She looked stunning. Absolutely stunning. And I felt that familiar flutter in my stomach, the same one I'd gotten since our first date. You look incredible, I told her, meaning every word. She smiled, but there was something different about it. Something I couldn't quite place. Thanks, babe. You look nice too. Nice. After 5 years together, after I'd spent 2 hours getting ready and wore the expensive cologne she'd given me for Christmas, I looked nice. The drive to the restaurant was unusually quiet. Sarah kept checking her phone, which wasn't like her during our date nights. We had this unspoken rule about phones, they stayed in bags or pockets when we were together. But she was scrolling through Instagram, double-tapping photos of her friends' vacation pics and new apartments. Everything okay? I asked at a red light. Of course, she said, not looking up. Just catching up on some things. The ring box felt heavy in my jacket pocket. I'd practiced the proposal speech so many times it was burned into my brain. I even had backup versions in case I got too nervous and forgot the main one. This was it, the night that would change everything. Chez Laurent was exactly what I'd hoped for. Dim lighting, actual candlelight, that quiet murmur of expensive conversations happening over even more expensive wine. The maitre d' led us to our table, and I felt proud walking behind Sarah, watching heads turn as she passed. She was mine, and after tonight, everyone would know it. We ordered drinks, her usual gin and tonic, my whiskey neat, and I started to relax. This was our element. Good food, good wine, just the two of us talking about everything and nothing. Sarah seemed more present now, laughing at my stories about work, telling me about the new project her marketing firm had landed. Remember our first anniversary? She said, swirling the ice in her drink. That terrible pizza place with the sticky floors? Hey, Antonio's wasn't that bad, I protested. The pizza was actually pretty good. The pizza was fine. It was everything else that was questionable, she laughed, and for a moment, everything felt normal again. Perfect, even. We ordered dinner, duck for her, steak for me, and settled into that comfortable rhythm couples develop over years together. But as the evening progressed, I noticed she kept checking her phone again. Little glances when she thought I wasn't looking, quick swipes to dismiss notifications. Sarah, I said gently. What's going on with the phone tonight? She looked up, slightly defensive. Nothing's going on. Can't I check my messages? Of course you can. It's just not like you during date night. She set the phone face down on the table. You're right. Sorry. I'm all yours. But she wasn't, not really. There was a distance there, a preoccupation I couldn't identify. Still, I pushed forward with the plan. After dinner, during dessert, I would do it. The chocolate soufflé would arrive, I'd make some joke about sweetness, then drop to one knee and ask her to marry me. The soufflé came. It was perfect, warm, rich, exactly what I'd imagined when I'd secretly called ahead to arrange it. Sarah took a bite and made that little sound of appreciation she always made for really good food. This is amazing, she said. Good choice. Well, you know me. I like things to be perfect for special occasions. She smiled, but again, there was something off about it. Something forced. I reached into my jacket pocket, my fingers finding the small velvet box. My heart was hammering so hard I was sure she could hear it over the restaurant's quiet jazz music. This was it. Sarah, I began, these 5 years have been the best of my life. Her eyes widened slightly. She could sense something big coming. You've made me a better person, and I can't imagine my future without you in it. I started to stand, to drop to one knee, when she held up her hand. Wait, she said quickly. Actually, before you. I mean, since we're talking about our relationship. I froze halfway between sitting and standing. What? I have something for you too. An anniversary gift. She reached into her purse, this sleek black clutch that probably cost more than my car payment, and pulled out an envelope. A thick, white envelope with my name written on it in her careful handwriting. I wanted to give this to you tonight because I think it's important for us to be honest about where we are. Something cold settled in my stomach. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I was supposed to give her the ring, she was supposed to cry happy tears, we were supposed to start planning our wedding over champagne. Go ahead, she said, nodding at the envelope. Open it. I sat back down, the ring box still clutched in my sweaty palm. With my other hand, I tore open the envelope. It was a gym membership. A full year at Fit Core, this trendy place downtown with personal trainers and juice bars and classes with names like Warrior Sculpt and Metabolic Mayhem. I stared at it for a long moment, reading the membership details, the benefits, the little welcome pamphlet with impossibly fit people doing impossibly difficult-looking exercises. I don't understand, I said finally. Sarah leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Jake, I love you. I really do. But I think we need to be honest about some things. What things? She glanced around the restaurant, then back at me. You've really let yourself go these past couple of years. The words hit me like a physical blow. Let myself go. I looked down at myself. Okay, maybe I'd gained some weight since college. Maybe I wasn't the same size I was at 22. But let myself go? I was 30, for crying out loud. I had a demanding job, adult responsibilities. I wasn't a college athlete anymore. I just think, she continued, if we're going to move forward together, we both need to be the best versions of ourselves. And right now, I'm not sure you're prioritizing your health. The restaurant suddenly felt too warm. The candle between us flickered, casting weird shadows across her face. Are you serious right now? I'm being loving but honest. The membership includes personal training sessions and nutrition counseling. I already talked to them about your goals. My goals? Losing about 30 pounds would be a good start. Getting back to your college weight. Maybe building some muscle definition. I felt like I was watching this conversation happen to someone else. Like I was floating above our table, watching this woman I loved, this woman I was about to propose to, systematically tear down everything about my physical appearance. Sarah, I'm not overweight. I'm maybe 15 pounds heavier than I was in college, which is normal for someone my age. 30, she corrected. I looked at photos from when we first met. It's closer to 30. She'd been analyzing photos of me. Calculating my weight gain. Planning this intervention. And it's not just the weight, she continued. You dress differently now. More casual. Less effort. Remember how you used to always wear button-down shirts? Now it's just t-shirts and jeans most of the time. Because I have a job where I don't need to wear business casual every day. It's not about need, Jake. It's about caring enough to make an effort. The ring box was burning a hole in my palm. I thought about the speech I'd practiced, about the future I'd imagined, about the morning I'd spent at 3 different jewelry stores to find the perfect ring. So this is my anniversary gift, I said slowly. A gym membership because you think I'm fat and lazy. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. Sarah sighed, the kind of sigh you give a child who's not understanding a simple concept. Look, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. I'm trying to help our relationship. Physical attraction is important, and I want to keep being attracted to you. Are you saying you're not attracted to me now? She hesitated just long enough for the answer to be clear. I'm saying I want us both to put in effort. Both? What effort are you not putting in? I go to yoga 3 times a week. I get my hair done regularly. I keep up with fashion. I take care of myself. The implication hung in the air like smoke, and you don't. I looked around the restaurant, at the other couples sharing romantic dinners, at the soft lighting and elegant atmosphere I'd specifically chosen for this moment. The moment that was now completely ruined. Okay, I said quietly. Okay? Okay, I hear you. Thank you for the gift. Her face brightened. Really? You're not upset? I'm processing it. But actually, since we're being honest about anniversary gifts, I have something for you too. I pulled out the ring box, and I swear I've never seen anyone's face change so dramatically so quickly. Her eyes went wide, her mouth dropped open, and she actually gasped, a sharp intake of breath that made the couple at the next table glance over. Jake, she whispered. I was going to do this differently, I said, my voice steady despite the fact that my entire world was crumbling. I had a whole speech planned. But since we're being honest tonight, I opened the box. The ring was beautiful, a classic solitaire with a brilliant cut diamond, exactly what she'd always said she wanted. The kind of ring that costs 3 months' salary and represents a lifetime of commitment. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Actual tears. Oh my goodness, Jake, it's beautiful. It's perfect. For a moment, I almost forgot about the gym membership. Almost forgot about the 30 pounds and the casual clothes and the way she'd looked at me like a project that needed fixing. Because this was the reaction I'd dreamed about, pure joy, overwhelming emotion, love so strong it brought tears to her eyes. But then I remembered. It is perfect, I agreed. I spent months finding it. Went to every jewelry store in the city. Saved up for over a year. I can't believe you did all this, she said, reaching for the box. I pulled it back slightly. Actually, before I give this to you, I want to be honest too. Her smile faltered just a little. Honest about what? About what I think of as anniversary gifts. I carefully lifted the ring out of its velvet setting. It caught the candlelight beautifully, throwing tiny rainbows across the white tablecloth. This ring represents everything I love about you, I continued. Your intelligence, your ambition, your beauty, both inside and out. Sarah was nodding, tears still threatening to spill over. But it also represents something else. It represents accepting someone exactly as they are. Loving them not for who they could become, but for who they already are. I held the ring up between us, and she reached for it instinctively. The thing is, Sarah, I don't think you understand what love means. Her hand stopped halfway to the ring. What? Love means looking at someone and thinking they're perfect, not looking at them and seeing a project. Love means wanting to grow old with someone, not wanting to change them into someone else. Jake, what are you saying? I carefully placed the ring on the table between us and slid the empty box across to her. I'm saying this is your anniversary gift. The box. She stared at it, confused. I don't understand. The box represents our relationship. Beautiful on the outside, empty on the inside. The color drained from her face. You're not serious. I am, actually. See, I thought I wanted to marry you. I thought we had something real. But real love doesn't come with conditions and improvement plans. Jake, you're being ridiculous. I was trying to help. No, I interrupted, my voice gaining strength. You were trying to change me into someone else. Someone you could be proud of instead of someone you already loved. She looked around the restaurant, suddenly aware that we were having this conversation in public. Her voice dropped to an urgent whisper. People are staring. Let them stare. I want them to hear this. I picked up the gym membership, examining it like I was reading it for the first time. You know what's funny about this? I was actually excited about our anniversary. I thought we were going to celebrate 5 years of loving each other exactly as we are. Instead, you handed me a list of everything that's wrong with me. That's not what this is. It's exactly what this is. You took photos of me and calculated how much weight I've gained. You analyzed my wardrobe and found it lacking. You decided that instead of accepting the man you've been with for 5 years, you'd rather try to rebuild me from scratch. Sarah was crying now, but they weren't happy tears anymore. They were desperate, panicked tears. Jake, please. You're misunderstanding everything. I love you. I want to marry you. No, you don't. You want to marry the version of me that exists in your head. The one who looks like I did in college and dresses like a catalog model and spends his evenings at the gym instead of reading or watching movies with you. I stood up, pulling out my wallet. The ring will be returned tomorrow. The reservation cost me $200, which I'm not getting back. But you know what? It's worth it to learn the truth about someone before marrying them instead of after. You can't be serious. You're throwing away 5 years over a gym membership? I threw a couple of 20s on the table for our drinks and dessert. I'm not throwing away 5 years over a gym membership, Sarah. I'm saving myself 50 years of being married to someone who thinks I'm not good enough as I am. The walk to the car was silent except for her quiet crying. I felt strangely calm, like a fever had broken. The ring was still sitting on our table. I'd left it there on purpose, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe I wanted the next couple to see it, to know that not all love stories have happy endings. I drove her home without a word. She kept trying to start conversations, to explain what she'd really meant, to take back the things that couldn't be taken back. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was thinking about all the little signs I'd missed, all the times she'd made comments about my appearance or lifestyle that I'd dismissed as jokes. When we got to her apartment, she turned to me with mascara streaking down her cheeks. Jake, please don't do this. We can work through this. I'll throw away the gym membership. We can pretend this never happened. But it did happen, Sarah. You can't unknow what you think of me. I think you're wonderful. I think you're perfect. No, you don't. You think I have potential. She sat there for a moment, searching for words that could undo the evening. Finally, she got out of the car without saying anything else. I watched her walk to her building, shoulders shaking with sobs, and I felt nothing. Not sadness, not regret, not even anger anymore. Just a strange emptiness where our relationship used to be. The next morning, I returned the ring. The jeweler was sympathetic but couldn't give me a full refund, store policy. I lost about $800, but honestly, it felt like the best money I'd ever spent. Sarah called 17 times that day. Then she texted. Then she showed up at my apartment. She was sorry, she said. She'd been stupid and shallow and she didn't know what had gotten into her. She loved me exactly as I was. But here's the thing about trust: once it's broken, you can't just glue it back together and pretend it never cracked. Every time she said she loved me as I was, I heard the unspoken but at the end of the sentence. 2 weeks later, I did sign up for a gym membership. Not at FitCore, I wouldn't give them the satisfaction, but at a regular place near my office. Not because Sarah was right about me letting myself go, but because I realized I had let something go, my own sense of what I wanted for myself versus what other people wanted from me. I started working out not to lose 30 pounds or to fit into my college clothes, but because it felt good to have goals that were mine alone. I started dressing better not because casual clothes were wrong, but because I'd stopped caring about how I presented myself to the world. Sarah was right about one thing: I had changed over 5 years. But not in the way she thought. I'd become comfortable, complacent. I'd stopped growing not physically, but mentally and emotionally. I'd started defining myself entirely through our relationship instead of maintaining my own identity within it. The gym membership she gave me was supposed to be about changing my body, but it ended up changing everything else instead. 3 months later, I ran into her at a coffee shop downtown. She looked good, she always looked good, but there was something tired around her eyes. "Jake," she said, surprised. "You look different." I did look different. I'd lost some weight, but more importantly, I carried myself differently. I felt like myself again, maybe for the first time in years. "Thanks. How are you doing?" "I'm okay. I'm seeing someone new, actually." Of course she was. Sarah wasn't the kind of person who stayed single long. "That's great. I'm happy for you." And the weird thing was, I actually meant it. We chatted for a few minutes about work and mutual friends, carefully avoiding anything that might lead back to our anniversary dinner or what had happened after. When she left, she hugged me goodbye, a brief, awkward hug that felt like closing a book you'd never read again. That night, I thought about the empty ring box sitting on our restaurant table, about the look on her face when she realized what I was doing, about the moment our 5-year relationship ended not with a proposal but with the truth. I don't regret what I did. Not the dramatic gesture, not the public confrontation, not even losing the money on the ring. Because that night taught me something important about love: it's not about finding someone who makes you want to be better, it's about finding someone who makes you realize you're already good enough. Sarah wasn't a bad person. She was just wrong for me. And maybe I was wrong for her too. Maybe she needed someone who shared her drive for constant self-improvement, someone who would see her suggestions as motivation instead of criticism. But I needed someone who could look at me on a random Thursday, wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and reading a book on the couch, and think, "Perfect. This is exactly who I want to grow old with." 6 months after our anniversary dinner, I met Rachel at a bookstore. She was browsing the philosophy section, wearing jeans and a coffee-stained sweater, her hair in a messy ponytail. When she laughed at something in the book she was reading, I knew I had to talk to her. We went for coffee after, then dinner, then a long walk where we talked about everything and nothing. When she mentioned she'd gained 15 pounds since starting her doctoral program and didn't care because she was too busy with research to worry about it, I knew I was in trouble. Good trouble. The kind of trouble that makes you want to be better not because someone tells you to, but because someone makes you want to be the best version of yourself, for them, but mostly for you. Rachel and I have been together 8 months now. Last week, she gave me a book for my birthday, a collection of essays about modern relationships and what it means to truly know someone. Inside the front cover, she wrote, "For Jake, who already knows exactly who he is." I still have the gym membership, by the way. Not the one Sarah gave me, I canceled it the next day, but my own. I work out 3 times a week now, not because I think I need to lose weight or change my body, but because it feels good to be strong. Because I like the way I feel after a hard workout, tired but accomplished. Rachel comes with me sometimes. She's terrible at it, uncoordinated and giggly and completely unconcerned with looking foolish. Watching her attempt to use the rowing machine while laughing at her own incompetence, I think about Sarah and her perfectly choreographed yoga poses, her carefully planned nutrition, her strategic approach to fitness. Both women are beautiful. Both are intelligent and driven and successful. But only one of them looks at me like I'm already everything she needs. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd just accepted the gym membership, thanks Sarah, and gone ahead with the proposal. If I'd tried to become the person she wanted me to be. Maybe we would have gotten married, maybe I would have lost the weight, maybe we would have been happy. But I don't think so. Because you can't build a marriage on the foundation of "you're not quite good enough yet." You can't promise to love someone in sickness and in health, for better or for worse, and then hand them a list of improvements on your anniversary. Love isn't about potential. It's not about seeing who someone could become if they just tried harder. It's about looking at someone exactly as they are, flaws and quirks and imperfections included, and thinking, yes. This one. Forever. The empty ring box was the best gift I ever gave. Not to Sarah, she probably doesn't see it that way, but to myself. Because it taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from someone who doesn't love you enough to accept you as you are. And sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is believe you deserve someone who does. I still think about that night sometimes, about the look on Sarah's face when she realized what was happening. I wonder if she learned anything from it, if she ever looked back and understood why her gift hurt me so much. I wonder if she's happy with her new boyfriend, if she's found someone who appreciates her drive for constant improvement. Mostly, though, I don't think about it anymore. Because I'm too busy being grateful for what came after, for the empty space that had to be created before something better could fill it. Rachel is reading beside me as I finish writing this, her feet tucked under my legs, wearing one of my old college t-shirts that she claims is more comfortable than any of her own clothes. Her hair is messy from sleep, she's not wearing makeup, and she's making little humming noises as she reads, a habit she doesn't even know she has. She is absolutely perfect. Exactly as she is. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. Let me tell you about the weeks after that anniversary dinner, because that's when things got really interesting. That's when I learned just how deep Sarah's need for control really went, and how far she was willing to go to get me back on her terms. The morning after I returned the ring, my phone started buzzing at 6 a.m. Sarah, of course. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to her message while drinking my coffee. Jake, I know you're angry, but please call me back. I was thinking about what you said last night, and you're right. I was being insensitive. But throwing away 5 years over one conversation seems extreme. We can work through this. I love you. Please call me. Her voice was shaky, desperate in a way I'd never heard before. For a moment, I felt that familiar tug of guilt, the urge to fix things and make everything okay again. It's amazing how quickly you can slip back into old patterns, even after a revelation like the one I'd had. I deleted the message without calling back. By noon, she'd called 6 more times. The messages got progressively more frantic, more manipulative. She was sorry, she'd made a mistake, she didn't know what had gotten into her. Then came the blame shifting. She'd been stressed at work, she'd been worried about us growing apart, she'd only wanted what was best for both of us. Finally, around 3 in the afternoon, she switched tactics entirely. Jake, I talked to my therapist about last night. Her voice was calmer now, more controlled. She helped me understand that I was projecting my own insecurities onto you. I've been so focused on self-improvement lately that I forgot relationships aren't about changing each other, they're about accepting each other. I get that now. Really, I do. Can we please talk? I'll come to you. I'll make dinner, we can talk this through like adults. The therapist angle was new, and it almost worked. Almost. Because it sounded like growth, like self-awareness, like exactly the kind of thing that could lead to genuine change. But then I replayed the conversation from the night before, remembered the way she'd looked at me when she handed me that gym membership, remembered her casual assessment that I needed to lose 30 pounds and dress better. You don't develop that level of dissatisfaction overnight. You don't analyze your boyfriend's weight gain and wardrobe choices on a whim. I turned off my phone. That evening, she showed up at my apartment. I saw her through the peephole, perfectly put together even in crisis mode, holding what looked like grocery bags and a bottle of wine. My first instinct was to pretend I wasn't home, but that felt cowardly. We needed to have this conversation eventually. "Hi," she said when I opened the door. Her smile was tentative, hopeful. "I brought ingredients for your favorite pasta." I leaned against the doorframe, not inviting her in. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" I wanted to apologize properly. "And I thought maybe we could cook together, like we used to when we first started dating. Remember those Sunday nights in your old apartment?" I did remember. Back when we were poor graduate students, Sunday pasta nights had been our tradition. We'd spend hours in my tiny kitchen, drinking cheap wine and making elaborate sauces from whatever we could afford. Those had been good times. Simple times. "That was a long time ago," I said. "It doesn't have to be." She held up the grocery bags. "I got everything for carbonara. The real kind, with pancetta and fresh parmesan." Despite everything, I felt myself wavering. Food had always been Sarah's love language, elaborate home-cooked meals, surprise deliveries to my office when I was working late, carefully planned dinner parties for our friends. She was a phenomenal cook, and she knew I was a sucker for her carbonara. "Please, Jake. Just give me a chance to explain." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside and let her in. My apartment felt different with her in it. Too small, somehow, like her presence took up more space than it used to. She moved around my kitchen with practiced efficiency, pulling out pots and pans, setting up ingredients. For a moment, it felt almost normal. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," she began, filling a pot with water. "About love meaning accepting someone as they are. And you're right. That's what love should be. She looked up from chopping onions, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I think I got so caught up in trying to be perfect myself that I forgot we're supposed to be perfect for each other, not perfect in general. It sounded good. It sounded like exactly what I needed to hear. The gym membership was thoughtless, she continued. I can see that now. It wasn't about your health, it was about my own insecurities. About feeling like I needed to have this perfect relationship to show off to everyone. Show off? She paused in her chopping. You know how competitive my friends are. Amanda just got engaged to that lawyer, Jessica bought a house with her boyfriend, everyone's always posting these perfect couple photos on social media. I think I started seeing our relationship as something that needed to measure up instead of something that just was. This was the most honest she'd been in months, maybe years. I found myself actually listening, actually considering whether this could be a real turning point for us. I don't care what your friends think about me, I said. I know that. And I love that about you. I love that you're secure enough in yourself that you don't need external validation. She started the pancetta, the smell filling my small kitchen with smoky goodness. Despite everything, my stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since breakfast, too wrapped up in processing the previous night to think about food. So what happens now? I asked. Now we figure out if we can get back to who we were before I messed everything up. Before you messed everything up? She looked at me sharply. That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. You're taking responsibility for one night, but not for the months of little comments and suggestions that led up to it. What little comments? I stared at her. Are you serious right now? I'm asking for specific examples. The audacity of it took my breath away. She was standing in my kitchen, cooking my favorite meal, asking me to provide evidence of her own behavior like we were in a courtroom. Fine, I said. 3 weeks ago, you suggested I might want to consider getting a haircut from someone other than the barber shop I've been going to for 4 years. You said my hair would look more intentional with proper styling. That's not. 2 months ago, you bought me a new cologne for no reason, then made a comment about how my old one was getting a little tired. I was just. Last month, you suggested we start doing meal prep together so we could both eat cleaner. When I said I liked our cooking just fine, you said it would be good for both of us to be more mindful about nutrition. Sarah had gone very still, the pancetta crackling in the pan behind her. And that's just the recent stuff, I continued. Should I go back further? The comments about my work clothes being too casual? The suggestion that I might enjoy reading different books, something more literary? The way you started sighing when I wanted to watch movies you deemed too lowbrow? Those weren't criticisms, she said quietly. They were suggestions. They were a systematic campaign to turn me into someone else. The pasta water was boiling now, but she wasn't moving to add the noodles. She was just standing there, looking at me like I was speaking a foreign language. I thought I was helping you grow, she said finally. I thought you loved who I already was. The silence stretched between us, filled only by the sound of boiling water and sizzling meat. I could see her processing this, trying to find a way to reframe it that didn't make her the villain of our story. Maybe we both have things to work on, she said eventually. Like what? What do I need to work on besides losing 30 pounds and dressing better and reading more literary fiction and getting expensive haircuts? That's not fair. It's completely fair. You came here to apologize, but you're still trying to make this about both of us needing to change instead of acknowledging that you're the one who decided I wasn't good enough. She turned off the burner and faced me fully. Fine. You want me to say it? I'll say it. I think you got comfortable. I think you stopped trying to impress me. There it was. The truth underneath all the therapy speak and carefully worded apologies. When did you stop trying to impress me? I asked. What? You said I stopped trying to impress you. When did you stop trying to impress me? I never stopped. I go to yoga, I eat well, I keep up with fashion, I maintain myself. That's not what I asked. When did you stop trying to make me feel good about myself? When did you stop complimenting me? When did you stop looking at me like I was someone worth being excited about? She opened her mouth, then closed it. You want to know when I got comfortable? I continued. I got comfortable when I thought I was with someone who loved me unconditionally. I stopped trying to impress you when I thought you were impressed by who I actually was, not who I might become. Jake, the carbonara smells great, I said, moving toward the door. But I think you should take it with you when you leave. You're kicking me out? I'm asking you to leave. There's a difference. She stared at me for a long moment, then started turning off burners and packing up ingredients with sharp, angry movements. This is ridiculous, she muttered. I come here to apologize, to work things out, and you turn it into another fight. You came here to manage me. To say the right words to get me back without actually changing anything fundamental about how you see me. I offered to change. You offered to stop mentioning that you think I need to change. That's not the same thing. She finished packing in silence, then paused at the door. "You know what I think?" she said, her voice cold now, all pretense of reconciliation gone. "I think you're using this as an excuse to run away from commitment. I think you're scared of marriage and you're using my gift as a reason to blow up our relationship." "Is that what you're going to tell people? That I'm afraid of commitment?" "I'm going to tell people the truth, that you ended a 5-year relationship over a gym membership." "No, Sarah. I ended a 5-year relationship because my girlfriend didn't think I was good enough to marry as I am." She left without another word, taking her groceries and her wine and her perfectly reasonable explanations with her. I stood in my kitchen for a long time after she left, smelling the lingering scent of pancetta and onions, thinking about Sunday nights in my old apartment when we were young and broke and completely in love with each other. Or at least, I thought we had been. The next few weeks were surreal. Sarah launched what I can only describe as a campaign to win me back, not through genuine change or self-reflection, but through a series of increasingly desperate gestures designed to prove she was the victim in our story. She sent flowers to my office with a note about how much she missed me. She left a bottle of expensive whiskey on my doorstep with a card explaining that she'd remembered I'd mentioned wanting to try it months ago. She accidentally showed up at places she knew I'd be: the coffee shop near my apartment, the bookstore I frequented, even the gym I'd started attending. Each encounter followed the same pattern. She'd act surprised to see me, make small talk, then gradually steer the conversation toward our relationship. How she'd been thinking about what I said. How she'd learned so much about herself. How she just wanted another chance to show me how much she loved me. The thing was, I could see the performance now. The carefully chosen words, the strategic timing, the way she'd position herself in my line of sight at the coffee shop, reading a book she knew I'd recognize and want to discuss. It was all so calculated, so manipulative, and I wondered how long she'd been doing this without me noticing. Then came the mutual friend's intervention. "You need to call Sarah," my friend Mike said over beers one Thursday night. "She's a mess, man. Like, genuinely falling apart." Mike had been my roommate senior year of college, the kind of friend who tells you uncomfortable truths when you need to hear them. If he was bringing this up, it wasn't casual. "She's not my problem anymore," I said. "Come on, Jake. 5 years together, and you throw it away over what? A gym membership? That's cold, even for you." "It wasn't about the gym membership." "Then what was it about?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you humiliated her in public over a gift." I took a long drink of my beer, trying to figure out how to explain something that I was still processing myself. "Have you ever had someone you loved tell you that you weren't good enough?" I asked. "Everyone's had that experience." "No, I mean really tell you. Not in a fight, not when they were angry. Just calmly, rationally explain all the ways you needed to improve before they could fully love you." Mike was quiet for a moment. "Because that's what the gym membership was," I continued. "It wasn't a gift. It was a performance review. Maybe she was just trying to help. Help me become someone else, yeah. That's not love, Mike. That's a project." He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You really think she doesn't love you?" "I think she loves the idea of me. The potential of me. But the actual me, the guy who's 15 pounds heavier than he was in college and wears t-shirts on weekends and reads mystery novels instead of literary fiction, that guy needs improvement before he's worthy of marriage." "15 pounds? She said 30. "Oh my gosh." "Yeah." We sat in silence for a while, watching the baseball game on the bar's TV. "For what it's worth," Mike said eventually, "I think you did the right thing. Maybe not the way you did it, but yeah. If someone can't love you as you are, what's the point?" That conversation helped, but it didn't stop the campaign. Sarah moved on to social media, posting cryptic quotes about forgiveness and second chances, along with carefully curated photos from our relationship, us at concerts, on vacation, at friends' weddings. Always photos where I looked particularly good, I noticed. Never the casual shots where I was just being myself. Then came the nuclear option. She called my mother. "Jacob," my mom said when she called me, using my full name in that tone that meant I was in trouble. I just got off the phone with Sarah. I closed my eyes. "Mom, she's devastated. She said you broke up with her out of nowhere, wouldn't even let her explain herself." "That's not what happened." "Then what did happen?" "Because from where I'm sitting, you've been with this girl for 5 years and suddenly you're single again with no explanation." I found myself in the strange position of having to explain to my mother why a gym membership had ended my relationship. It sounded insane even to me. "She thinks you're not good enough as you are," my mom said when I finished. "Is that really what you heard?" "It's what she said, Mom. She literally told me I'd let myself go." "Maybe she's worried about your health." "She's worried about my appearance." My mother was quiet for a long moment. She'd always liked Sarah. What wasn't to like? Sarah was successful, beautiful, charming, and made an effort with my family that my previous girlfriends never had. Sometimes people say things wrong, she said finally. Sometimes they care so much they hurt the people they love without meaning to. And sometimes they show you exactly who they are, and you should listen. You love this girl, Jake. I've seen you together. Are you really willing to throw that away? I'm not throwing anything away, Mom. I'm refusing to accept crumbs when I deserve the whole meal. It was the first time I'd articulated it that way, and it felt good. True. That's very philosophical, but relationships are about compromise. Compromise, yes. Complete personality overhaul, no. After I hung up, I realized that Sarah had found my weakness. My family adored her, my friends thought she was great, and she was using that social network to pressure me into taking her back. It was brilliant, in a sociopathic kind of way. But it also confirmed everything I'd suspected about her character. 2 months after our anniversary dinner, the pressure campaign reached its peak. I came home from work to find Sarah sitting on the steps of my apartment building, looking perfectly pitiful in designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I've been thinking, she said without preamble. About what? About us. About what went wrong. I unlocked my door, debating whether to invite her up. The last time had gone so badly that I wasn't eager for a repeat performance. I think I know what the real problem is, she continued. Against my better judgment, I was curious. Which is? We stopped growing together. We got comfortable and stopped challenging each other. There was that word again, comfortable. Like it was a disease instead of the natural result of trust and security. Challenging each other how? We used to have goals together. We used to push each other to be better. Better at what? At everything. At our careers, at our health, at our relationship. We used to inspire each other. I sat down on the step next to her, maintaining some distance. When did we stop inspiring each other? I think it happened gradually. We fell into routines. We stopped surprising each other. So the gym membership was supposed to be inspiring? She turned to face me fully. It was supposed to be a wake-up call. For both of us. What did you need to wake up from? From settling. From accepting okay when we could have amazing. There it was again, the implication that what we had wasn't good enough, that I wasn't good enough. Sarah, do you hear yourself? You're saying our 5-year relationship was just okay. You're saying I was just okay. That's not. It's exactly what you're saying. You're saying we needed to be better, which means what we were wasn't sufficient. She was quiet for a moment, thinking. Maybe it wasn't, she said finally. The honesty was brutal and refreshing at the same time. At least we were finally talking about what she really thought. So why did you want to marry someone who was just okay? Because I thought we could become amazing together. And if we couldn't? If I stayed exactly as I am right now for the rest of my life, would that be enough for you? The pause before her answer told me everything I needed to know. I think you're capable of so much more, she said carefully. That's not what I asked. I think everyone is capable of growth and improvement. Sarah, if I never changed, never lost weight, never dressed differently, never became more ambitious or literary or sophisticated, would you still want to marry me? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I don't think anyone stays exactly the same, she said finally. That's still not an answer. I think I fell in love with your potential as much as who you were. And there it was. The truth we'd been dancing around for months, maybe years. You can't marry potential, I said. You can only marry a person. But people change. People grow. That's what makes relationships exciting. People also stay fundamentally the same. That's what makes relationships stable. We sat in silence as the sun set behind the buildings across the street. I felt strangely peaceful, like a weight I'd been carrying for years had finally been lifted. I think we want different things, I said. We want each other. You want a version of me that doesn't exist. I want someone who loves the version of me that does. I do love you. You love who you think I could become. That's not the same thing. Sarah started crying then, not the manipulative tears from the restaurant, but genuine grief. The kind of crying that comes when you realize something is really, truly over. I don't know how to love someone without wanting them to be better, she whispered. It was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me, and also the saddest. I know, I said. And I don't know how to love someone who thinks I need to be better. So here we are. She left after that, for real this time. No more flowers, no more strategic coffee shop encounters, no more calls to my mother. Just a text message a week later saying she'd picked up the last of her things from my apartment while I was at work, and that she hoped I'd be happy. I was happy, as it turned out. Not immediately. The first few weeks were lonely and strange, full of muscle memory moments when I'd reach for my phone to text her about something funny or interesting, only to remember she wasn't part of my life anymore. But gradually, I started to remember who I was outside of our relationship. I started cooking again, not elaborate meals designed to impress, just food I enjoyed eating. I started reading whatever I wanted without wondering if it was intellectual enough. I bought clothes that felt comfortable instead of stylish. Most importantly, I started to understand the difference between loving someone and loving the idea of someone. 6 months later, when I met Rachel at that bookstore, I knew the difference immediately. When she laughed at something in her book, I wasn't attracted to her potential or imagining how she might look with different clothes or a better haircut. I was attracted to exactly who she was in that moment: messy hair, coffee-stained sweater, completely unself-conscious laughter and all. Our first conversation lasted 3 hours. We talked about books, about work, about traveling, about our families. Not once did she suggest I might enjoy a different type of book or hint that my stories would be more interesting with different details. She just listened, laughed, asked questions, and seemed genuinely delighted by whatever I had to say. When I walked her to her car, she turned to me and said, "I had a really nice time. You're exactly the kind of person I hoped I'd meet." Not the kind of person she hoped I'd become. The kind of person I already was. That's when I knew I was going to fall in love with her. And I did. Completely, messily, joyfully in love with someone who thinks I'm perfect exactly as I am, 15 pounds heavier than my college weight, wardrobe full of comfortable clothes, mystery novel collection and all. Last month, Rachel and I were walking through the mall when we passed the jewelry store where I'd bought Sarah's ring. Rachel stopped to look at the engagement rings in the window, not because she was hinting about anything, but because she's fascinated by the marketing psychology of luxury goods. "Look at how they display these," she said, pointing to the elaborate settings and dramatic lighting. "They're not selling rings, they're selling the idea of perfect love." "What's wrong with perfect love?" I asked. "Nothing, if you're talking about loving someone perfectly as they are. But I think most people confuse perfect love with perfect people. They think the right ring or the right proposal or the right partner will create this flawless relationship. And you don't believe in flawless relationships?" She laughed. "I believe in relationships between flawed people who choose to love each other's flaws instead of trying to fix them." Standing there in front of that jewelry store, I realized I was looking at my future wife. Not because she was perfect, but because she understood that love isn't about perfection, it's about acceptance. I haven't proposed yet, but I will. Soon. And when I do, it won't be because I think she needs to be locked down or improved or changed in any way. It'll be because I want to spend the rest of my life with exactly the person she is right now, coffee stains and messy hair and inappropriate laughter and all. The ring I give her won't be a symbol of potential or a promise to become better. It'll be a symbol of recognition that I've found someone who already loves me completely, and whom I love completely in return. That's what Sarah never understood. Love isn't about seeing who someone could become. It's about seeing who they already are and thinking, yes, this one. Forever. The empty box I gave her that night wasn't cruel, it was honest. Our relationship was beautiful on the outside and empty on the inside, just like that velvet box. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do is show someone the truth, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Story 2. "I need space," my wife said the morning after our wedding, suitcase in hand. "I'm going on our honeymoon alone, maybe this marriage was a mistake." I just nodded and wished her a safe flight. 3 days later, her mom called screaming. My wife had arrived at the Bali resort to find the honeymoon cancelled, the massages refunded, and the sunset cruise gone. Waiting in her inbox instead? Divorce papers citing her affair with my best man and screenshots of their messages planning to get through the wedding before starting their life together. Now she's outside my door, begging me to reconsider, claiming it was just cold feet and meaningless flirting, while her mother calls my parents about the cruel prank I've played on her innocent daughter. Look, I need to tell someone this story before I lose my mind completely. You know how they say revenge is a dish best served cold? Well, mine was served with a side of 5-star resort cancellations and a garnish of pure, calculated fury. "I need space," my wife said the morning after our wedding, suitcase in hand like she was heading to soccer practice instead of destroying what should have been the happiest day of my life. "I'm going on our honeymoon alone, maybe this marriage was a mistake." I just stood there in my boxers and yesterday's dress shirt, coffee mug halfway to my lips, watching this woman I'd supposedly just promised to love and cherish pack her designer luggage like she was fleeing a crime scene. Which, I guess, she was. "Safe flight," I said. Because what else do you say when your bride of 14 hours tells you your marriage might be a mistake? "Have fun in Bali." She paused at the door, and for a split second I thought she might turn around, might laugh and tell me this was some twisted joke newlyweds play on each other. Instead, she adjusted her purse strap and said, "I'll call you when I figure things out." The door clicked shut with the same finality as a coffin lid. Now, here's where most guys would crumble. Maybe drink themselves into a coma or call their buddies to cry into a beer about how women are impossible to understand. Me? I sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop and started making some very interesting phone calls. See, The thing about planning a wedding is that you learn a lot about vendor policies. Cancellation fees, refund windows, the precise language needed to undo months of careful planning. And when you're the one whose credit card paid for everything, well, that gives you certain privileges. 3 days. That's how long it took for her mother to call me, voice cracking like ice on a frozen lake. "What have you done?" she screamed into the phone. I had to hold it away from my ear. "Sarah's at the resort and nothing's there. The room, the couple's massage, the sunset cruise, it's all gone. They said everything was cancelled." I leaned back in my chair, feet up on the coffee table, surrounded by wedding photos I hadn't had the heart to look at until that moment. Sarah in her dress, radiant and laughing. Sarah dancing with my best man Marcus. Sarah whispering in Marcus's ear while I talked to my college roommate. "That's terrible," I said, and I meant it. It really was terrible. Did she check her email? Her email? What does that have to do with anything? "You need to fix this right now, David. This is your wife we're talking about." "My wife." "Right. Mrs. Chen," I said, using that calm voice I'd perfected during years of customer service jobs. "I think Sarah should definitely check her email. There might be some important documents waiting for her." The line went quiet for a long moment. In the background, I could hear Mr. Chen asking what was happening, his voice tight with confusion. "What kind of documents?" she whispered. "The kind that explain exactly why the honeymoon got cancelled." I hung up before she could respond. My phone immediately started buzzing with texts from Sarah, but I was already pouring myself a glass of orange juice, celebration seemed premature for alcohol, and opening my laptop to admire my handiwork. The divorce papers had taken me 2 days to prepare. I'm not a lawyer, but I am thorough, and I had help from a very sympathetic attorney who'd handled his own cheating spouse situation a few years back. The screenshots were even more beautiful, though. 6 months of text messages between Sarah and Marcus, planning their future together, discussing how to get through the wedding and make it look normal until they could start their real life. "Just a few more weeks and we can stop pretending," Marcus had written. "Can't wait to finally be together without all this sneaking around." Sarah's response, "I know, baby. The wedding is just theater at this point. Once the honeymoon is over, I'll tell David the first need time to think, and we can be together for real." Theater. My wedding was theater. The funniest part, and I use funny in the most bitter, twisted way possible, was the message from 3 days before our wedding. I almost called it off today. Felt so guilty seeing him so happy. "But you're right, we've come too far to back out now. Plus, his family would never forgive me if I cancelled with all the deposits paid." Deposits. She stayed for the deposits. My phone rang again. Sarah this time. "David?" Her voice was small, broken. Nothing like the confident woman who'd walked out of our apartment 72 hours ago. "David, I can explain everything." "Can you?" I asked. I was standing in our bedroom now, looking at her side of the closet. Half empty, like she'd been planning this departure for a while. "Because I'm really curious about the explanation for 6 months of planning a life with my best man while planning a wedding with me." Silence. Then crying. Soft, desperate crying that might have moved me a week ago. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she whispered. "We didn't mean for it to happen. It was just so easy to talk to him, and you were always working, and you decided to solve that problem by marrying me anyway?" I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. I pulled one of her dresses from the closet. The blue one I'd bought her for our 6-month anniversary. She'd worn it on their first real date, according to the messages. Worn it while telling me she was having dinner with her sister. "You seemed pretty clear about what you wanted in your texts," I said. "Should I read some of them to you? I have them all printed out. Very romantic stuff." "Please don't do this." Her voice cracked completely. "Please. I made a mistake. It was just cold feet, just meaningless flirting. I choose you. I married you. You married me for the deposits, Sarah. Your words, not mine." The sound she made wasn't quite human. Somewhere between a sob and the noise a wounded animal makes when it knows it's been caught. "The papers aren't real," she said suddenly. "You can't divorce me from another country. That's not how it works." I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "You're right. But adultery is grounds for annulment in this state. Especially when it's premeditated. Especially when there's evidence." My lawyer was very thorough about explaining the difference. "Your lawyer? Did you think I was going to handle this myself? I may be many things, Sarah, but stupid isn't one of them." She was quiet for a long time. I could hear background noise, airport sounds, announcements in Indonesian, the bustle of people going places with people they actually wanted to be with. "What do you want?" she asked finally. What did I want? I wanted my wedding day back. I wanted the 6 months of lies back. I wanted to unknow what I now knew about the woman I'd promised to love and cherish. I wanted Marcus to be the friend I'd thought he was instead of a snake who'd spent our bachelor party texting my fiancée about how much he missed her. I want you to stay in Bali, I said. Take some time to think. Figure out what you really want. When you come back, we can talk about dividing up our stuff. Our stuff? David, this is our home. These are our things. You can't just. I can't what? I can't cancel honeymoon reservations I paid for? I can't file legal papers when my wife of one day leaves me for my best man? I can't protect myself from someone who's been lying to me for 6 months? She didn't have an answer for that. I'll pay for your hotel, I said, because despite everything, I'm not completely heartless. Find somewhere nice. Eat good food. Figure out if you want to be with Marcus badly enough to give up everything else. I want to be with you, she whispered. No, you don't. You want to not have consequences. You want to eat your cake and have it too. You want Marcus and the life we built and your parents' approval and the nice wedding photos. But you can't have all of that, Sarah. That's not how life works. I hung up and turned off my phone. The next 24 hours were a masterpiece of strategic communication management. Sarah's mother called my parents. My parents called me. Marcus tried to reach me through mutual friends. Sarah's bridesmaids were apparently staging some kind of intervention via group text, demanding I fix this misunderstanding and stop being petty. Petty. 6 months of adultery and an abandoned honeymoon, and I was being petty. My favorite call came from Marcus himself, voice slurred with what I assumed was panic drinking. Dude, what the heck? Sarah's parents are saying you served her divorce papers in Bali. That's insane. Come on, man. We've been friends since college. Have we? I asked. I was cleaning out the garage, boxing up wedding gifts I'd never use. Because friends don't usually sleep with each other's fiancés. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. I read your messages, Marcus. All of them. The ones where you planned your first weekend getaway. The ones where you talked about getting an apartment together after my wedding. The ones where you discussed whether she should sleep with me on our wedding night or make an excuse. His breathing got sharp and shallow. You weren't supposed to. How did you? How did I what? How did I figure out that my wife of 12 hours was planning to leave me for my best man? Maybe it was when she literally left me 12 hours after our wedding. Or maybe it was when I found her backup phone in our bedroom. The one she used to text you. The one she forgot to take with her in her hurry to get to the airport. I hadn't actually found a backup phone. Sarah used her regular phone for everything, apparently confident I'd never think to check it. But Marcus didn't know that, and the pause told me everything I needed to know about his guilty conscience. Look, he said finally, it just happened, okay? We didn't plan it. It was just natural. 6 months of natural. Right up until my wedding day. She was going to tell you after? After what? After you got her pregnant? After she cleaned out our joint bank account? After she convinced me to put her name on the house deed? When exactly was this confession supposed to happen, Marcus? He didn't have an answer. They never do when you corner them with their own timeline. I loved you like a brother, I said, and that part hurt more than I expected. I asked you to be my best man because I trusted you more than anyone in the world. And you spent my bachelor party texting my fiancé about how you couldn't wait for the wedding to be over so you could finally be together. David, do me a favor, Marcus. Don't call me again. Don't text. Don't send mutual friends to plead your case. In fact, do me the biggest favor of all, go to Bali. Sarah's alone in a foreign country with no hotel room and no plan. She needs someone to take care of her, and apparently, that someone was supposed to be you all along. I hung up and immediately blocked his number. Here's something no one tells you about betrayal: the practical parts are almost worse than the emotional parts. We had a joint checking account. A lease with both our names. Wedding gifts from people who'd traveled across the country to celebrate our love. Thank you cards to write for a marriage that lasted less than a day. But the weird thing was, I felt free. For 6 months, I'd been planning a life with someone who was planning a different life entirely. For 6 months, I'd been solving problems and making compromises and adjusting my dreams to fit someone else's secret agenda. For 6 months, I'd been living a lie so complete that even I believed it. Now I was living the truth. And the truth was surprisingly liberating. I kept the apartment. Sarah's name wasn't on the lease, which turned out to be a blessing I hadn't realized I'd given myself. I kept the car, which I'd paid for. I kept the furniture we'd picked out together, though I moved some of it around. The bed went to the guest room. I bought a new one, bigger, with space for just me and whatever future I decided to build. The wedding gifts were trickier. Some of them went back to the stores. Others went to charity. A few I kept, either because they were useful or because they came from people I genuinely loved. My grandmother's contribution, a handmade quilt that had taken her 2 years to finish, went into a closet. I wasn't ready to use it, but I couldn't bear to give it away. 3 weeks later, Sarah came home. She looked different. Thinner, with dark circles under her eyes and hair that needed washing. She stood outside our apartment building with 2 suitcases and an expression I'd never seen before, complete defeat. She rang the buzzer. "David? It's me. Can we please talk?" I looked down at her from my third-floor window. She looked so small standing there, so lost and broken. For a moment, I felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the screenshots printed out in my filing cabinet, and the feeling passed. "Sure," I said into the intercom. "We can talk." She came up the stairs slowly, like each step hurt. When I opened the door, she just stood there for a moment, taking in the changes I'd made. The rearranged furniture. The missing photos. The absence of her presence. "It looks different," she said. "It is different." She sat on the couch, the same couch where we'd planned our wedding, where we'd discussed what kind of house we wanted to buy, where we'd mapped out the future we'd never have. "I made a terrible mistake," she said without looking at me. "The worst mistake of my life. I know that now." "Do you?" "Marcus left me in Bali." Her voice was flat, matter of fact. "Second day I was there. Said he'd realized he wasn't ready for a serious relationship after all. Said seeing how devastated I was made him understand that he'd just been caught up in the excitement of something forbidden." I sat across from her in the chair I'd moved to the other side of the room. "That must have been difficult." I spent 2 weeks alone in a country where I didn't speak the language, trying to figure out how I'd destroyed my entire life for someone who didn't even want me once he had me. "And what did you figure out?" She finally looked at me. Her eyes were red and swollen, like she'd been crying for the entire 2 weeks. "That I'm an idiot. That I threw away the best thing in my life for a fantasy. That Marcus was never the man I thought he was, and you were always better than I deserved." "That's probably true." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "I know you hate me. I know you'll probably never forgive me. But I need you to know that it wasn't real with him. It was just escape. From responsibility, from growing up, from being the person I'm supposed to be. You made me want to be better, and that scared me, so I ran toward someone who let me stay exactly as I was. And now? Now I know exactly as I was wasn't good enough. For you, for marriage, for any kind of real life." She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "I know the annulment papers are probably already filed. I know you've moved on. I needed you to hear me say that I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. Not for getting caught, not for the consequences, but for hurting you. For betraying you. For turning what should have been the happiest day of your life into the worst one." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation, for the Sarah who'd spent 6 months lying to me with perfect sincerity. But all I saw was exhaustion and genuine remorse. "The papers aren't filed yet," I said. Her head snapped up. "They're not?" I wanted to be absolutely sure. "Annulment isn't divorce, Sarah. It means the marriage never legally existed. It means our wedding day gets erased from the record like it never happened. I wanted to make sure that's what I wanted before I made it official." "And is it? What you want?" I thought about that question. I'd been thinking about it for 3 weeks, actually. In the moments between anger and relief, between betrayal and freedom, I'd been wondering what I actually wanted from all this. "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "Part of me wants to erase it all. Pretend none of this happened and start over with a clean slate. But part of me thinks that would be dishonest. This did happen. You did choose someone else. I did spend the best and worst day of my life learning who you really are. Who am I really?" She asked quietly. "I don't know. That's what I've been trying to figure out. Are you the woman who planned a beautiful wedding with me and meant every word of her vows? Or are you the woman who was texting another man about how much theater it all was? Are you someone who made a terrible mistake, or someone who's sorry she got caught?" She was quiet for a long time. Outside, I could hear the normal sounds of our neighborhood, kids playing, someone mowing their lawn, life continuing for everyone who hadn't had their world turned inside out 3 weeks ago. "Can I tell you something?" she said eventually. "Sure. I didn't love him. I thought I did, but I didn't. I was in love with the idea of him. With having someone who didn't know all my flaws yet, who still thought I was perfect. With you, I felt like I had to be worthy of all the love you gave me. With him, I felt like I could just exist and that would be enough. That doesn't make it better, Sarah. I know. I'm not trying to make it better. I'm trying to make it true." She leaned forward, hands clasped in her lap. "Do you know what the worst part is? The worst part is that I knew on our wedding day that I was making the right choice. When I saw you at the altar, when I said those vows, I meant every single word. For those few hours, I was completely, totally yours. And then the reception started, and Marcus smiled at me, and I remembered that I'd been living in 2 worlds, and I panicked. So you decided to burn one of them down. I decided to run away from the hard one. The one where I had to be the person you thought I was instead of the person I'd always been." I looked at her sitting there, small and defeated and honest in a way I'd never seen her before, and I realized something surprising. I wasn't angry anymore. The fury that had sustained me through 3 weeks of legal paperwork and cancelled honeymoons had burned itself out, leaving something else behind. Not forgiveness, exactly, but understanding. "What do you want now?" I asked. "I want to earn your forgiveness. I want to spend however long it takes proving that the person who married you is the person I really am, and the person who left you was just scared and stupid and too immature to deserve what we had. And if I say no? If I sign the papers tomorrow and erase our marriage like it never happened?" She took a shaky breath. "Then I'll understand. And I'll spend the rest of my life knowing that I had everything I ever wanted and threw it away for someone who didn't even want me once he had me." We sat in silence for a while. The apartment felt different with both of us in it again, like a space that had been holding its breath finally exhaling. "I need time," I said finally. "Real time. Not a few days or a few weeks. Months, maybe longer. I need time to figure out if what we had was real or if I was just as caught up in theater as you were. I can give you time. And I need complete honesty. No more phones I don't know about, no more friends I can't trust, no more conversations I'm not invited to. If we try this, and I mean if, it has to be completely transparent. You have to be willing to live your life like an open book until I can trust you again." "Yes. Anything." "And Marcus is gone. Completely. He doesn't exist in our world anymore. I don't want to hear his name, I don't want him at parties we both attend, I don't want him in our lives in any way. Can you live with that?" She nodded without hesitation. "He already made that choice for both of us." "Okay." I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and came back with 2 glasses of water. I handed her one and sat back down. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to find your own place. Somewhere close, but separate. You're going to live there for at least 6 months while we figure out if this marriage can be saved or if it needs to die." 6 months? Minimum. We're going to start over, Sarah. Not like none of this happened, but like 2 people who know exactly what the stakes are. We're going to date. Really date. We're going to have conversations about who we are and who we want to be. We're going to rebuild trust from the ground up, or we're going to realize it can't be rebuilt. And the annulment? Gets put on hold. But not dismissed. It stays there like a sword over our heads, reminding us both that this second chance is the only one we get. She was crying again, but different tears this time. Relief, maybe, or gratitude. "I know I don't deserve this," she whispered. "You don't. But maybe I do. Maybe I deserve the chance to find out if the woman I married was real or if she was just another performance." "She was real. Is real. I swear to you, David, the woman who married you is the truest version of myself I've ever been." "Then prove it." 3 months later, I'm writing this story sitting in the same chair where we had that conversation. Sarah lives in a studio apartment 6 blocks away. We see each other 3 times a week, dinner on Wednesday, something fun on Saturday, brunch on Sunday. We talk on the phone every day, but not for hours like we used to. We're learning how to be together without living in each other's pockets. It's strange, dating your own wife. Strange and difficult and sometimes surprisingly wonderful. We're discovering things about each other we never knew, having conversations we never had. She's funnier than I remembered, more sarcastic, less afraid to disagree with me. I'm more patient than she expected, more willing to listen, less interested in being right than in being understood. Last week, she showed me her phone without me asking. Every message, every app, every contact. She'd changed her number and started over with a clean digital slate. Marcus wasn't just blocked, he might as well have never existed. "I want you to have the password," she said. "I want you to be able to check whenever you want, for as long as you need to." "I don't want to live like that," I told her. "If we can't rebuild trust, then we can't rebuild anything. But if it helps, it would help me feel safe, but it wouldn't help me trust you. There's a difference." She thought about that for a while. "You're a better person than I am." Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of being suspicious of everyone I love. The annulment papers are still in my filing cabinet, unsigned. Some days I take them out and read them, reminding myself that I have an exit strategy. Other days I forget they exist entirely, caught up in the weird, fragile hope that we might actually make this work. Sarah's mother still calls sometimes, alternating between guilt trips about how I humiliated her daughter and grudging admiration for how I handled the situation. Her father sent me a card last month, just a simple "thank you for giving her another chance" written in his careful handwriting. I think I like him better now than I did before all this happened. We haven't talked about moving back in together. We haven't talked about a future beyond the next few months. We're taking it one day at a time, one honest conversation at a time, one rebuilt moment of trust at a time. But last Sunday, over brunch, she said something that made me think we might actually make it. "I used to think marriage was about finding someone who would love you no matter what," she said, cutting her pancakes into precise little squares the way she always does. "But I think I was wrong. I think marriage is about becoming someone worthy of being loved no matter what. And I wasn't that person before. Are you now?" I'm working on it. Every day. Not for you, though that's part of it. For me. Because I don't want to be the kind of person who throws away something beautiful just because it requires me to be better than I was. I reached across the table and took her hand. She looked surprised. We don't do casual contact yet, still too fragile for assumptions of intimacy. I'm working on it too, I said. Working on being the kind of person who can forgive something unforgivable. Working on trusting someone who broke my trust completely. Working on loving someone who hurt me more than I thought I could be hurt. Is it working? I looked at her sitting there in the morning sunlight, hair messy from sleep, makeup free and real and nothing like the perfect bride who'd walked out on me 3 months ago. She looked older, more tired, but also more solid somehow. More present. Ask me in 6 months, I said. She squeezed my hand. I will. So that's where we are now. In limbo, in hope, in the strange space between ending and beginning. The honeymoon we never took hangs over us like a ghost, but maybe that's okay. Maybe we needed to learn how to be married before we could learn how to celebrate being married. The divorce papers, annulment papers, are still there, waiting. Some days they feel like a threat, other days like a safety net, most days like what they actually are, a reminder that love without trust is just elaborate pretending, and trust without honesty is just wishful thinking. But we're learning. Slowly, carefully, with the kind of deliberate attention you give to something you know you can break if you're not careful enough. We're learning how to be honest even when it hurts, how to forgive even when it feels impossible, how to rebuild something stronger from pieces that were never as solid as we thought. I don't know how this story ends yet. Maybe with real forgiveness and a real marriage. Maybe with signed papers and a clean slate for both of us. Maybe with something in between that we haven't imagined yet. But I know this, I'm not the same man who stood in his boxers and dress shirt watching his bride walk out on their marriage. And she's not the same woman who thought she could live 2 lives and keep both of them. We're different people now, building something new from the wreckage of something we thought was perfect but was actually just pretty. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's everything. The suitcase she packed that morning sits in her closet now, empty and ready just in case. But she hasn't used it since she came back from Bali, and I'm starting to think maybe she never will. Time will tell. It always does. 6 months after that conversation, Sarah and I were sitting in a marriage counselor's office that smelled like vanilla candles and optimism. Dr. Martinez had kind eyes and the sort of calm demeanor that made you want to spill your deepest secrets just to see if she'd flinch. She didn't. Tell me about the moment you decided to try rebuilding your marriage, she said, looking between us with professional curiosity. Sarah shifted in her chair, the leather squeaking slightly. I think it was when David handed me the glass of water. It sounds stupid, but nobody had taken care of me in any small way for weeks. I'd been taking care of myself in Bali, figuring out hotels and food and currency, and when I came home, I was just empty. And he gave me water. Like I was still a person worth basic kindness. And you, David? I thought about it. Honestly? It was when she said Marcus left her. Not because I was happy she got hurt, but because I realized she'd been as much a victim of her own poor choices as I was. She thought she was trading up for something better, and it turned out to be nothing at all. That's when I understood that her betrayal wasn't about me not being enough, it was about her not knowing what enough looked like. Dr. Martinez nodded. That's a significant realization. How has that understanding affected your relationship dynamic? It's made me less angry, I said. Not less hurt, but less angry. Anger assumes malice. What Sarah did was incredibly stupid and selfish, but it wasn't malicious. She didn't set out to destroy me. She just didn't think about me at all, which is somehow both worse and better. Sarah winced. That makes me sound like a sociopath. No, Dr. Martinez said gently. It makes you sound like someone who was operating from fear and immaturity rather than genuine malice. There's an important difference. Tell me about the trust rebuilding process, she continued. What's working? What isn't? Sarah took a breath. The transparency is working. I tell David everything now, where I'm going, who I'm seeing, what I'm thinking about. At first it felt suffocating, like being under surveillance. But now it feels safe. Like I don't have to remember what story I told to whom. And the challenge? Learning to live with his doubt. David tries to hide it, but I can see it sometimes. When I'm 5 minutes late, when my phone dies, when I mention someone he doesn't know. There's this split second where I can see him wondering if I'm lying again. And I have to resist getting defensive, because of course he's wondering. I gave him every reason to wonder. I reached over and took her hand without thinking about it. 6 months ago, that gesture would have been calculated, a conscious decision to offer comfort. Now it was automatic, which felt like progress. The doubt is getting smaller, I said. But Sarah's right, it's still there. Some days I feel like myself again, like the man who trusted completely because it never occurred to me not to. Other days I feel like a detective in my own life, looking for clues that everything I believe is wrong again. That's normal, Dr. Martinez assured me. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal linearly. It comes back in waves, with setbacks and surges. The key is recognizing that the doubt isn't necessarily about Sarah's current behavior, it's about your nervous system trying to protect you from experiencing that level of betrayal again. She was right. The hypervigilance wasn't really about whether Sarah was cheating now, it was about the bone-deep terror of being that blind again, of building a life on a foundation that could crumble without warning. Has the separate living situation been helpful? Dr. Martinez asked. Yes and no, Sarah said. Yes, because it's forced us to be intentional about our time together. We don't take each other for granted anymore. Every conversation feels chosen, every moment together feels precious. But no, because sometimes I just want to fall asleep next to my husband without it being a big decision. We've been talking about that, I said. About what moving back in together might look like. And? Scary, Sarah admitted. What if we get comfortable again and fall back into old patterns? What if I start taking David for granted again? What if he starts assuming I'm trustworthy before I've really earned it back? What would earning it back look like to you? Dr. Martinez asked. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. I think it means getting to the point where David's doubt is about normal relationship things, like whether I remember to pay the electric bill, instead of whether I'm secretly planning to leave him for someone else. And for you, David? What would trust restored look like? Honestly? I don't know if it'll ever look like it did before. I don't know if I want it to. The way I trusted before was kind of naive. I just assumed that because I was incapable of that level of deception, Sarah was too. I projected my own moral framework onto her without really knowing if she shared it. So what would a more mature trust look like? Trusting her because I know her, not because I assume she's like me. Trusting her because of her choices and actions, not because betrayal is unthinkable. I guess. Trusting her eyes wide open instead of closed. Dr. Martinez smiled. That's actually a much stronger foundation for a marriage than blind trust. Blind trust is passive. Conscious trust is active. After the session, Sarah and I walked to a coffee shop near her apartment. It was one of our regular spots now, a place that belonged to this new version of our relationship rather than the old one. Can I ask you something? Sarah said, stirring her latte unnecessarily. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Marcus hadn't left me in Bali? If he'd actually wanted to build a life with me? The question hit me like a small punch to the stomach. Sometimes. And? I thought about it carefully. I think you would have tried. I think you would have convinced yourself you were happy for a while. But I don't think it would have lasted. Why not? Because Marcus didn't leave you in Bali because he wasn't ready for a serious relationship. He left because when the fantasy became reality, it wasn't what he thought he wanted. And you? You were never really in love with Marcus. You were in love with escape. Sarah stared into her coffee. That's terrifying. What is? That you understand me better than I understood myself. Even after everything I did to you, you see me more clearly than Marcus ever did. More clearly than I saw myself. Maybe that's why we might actually make it, I said. Not because we love each other, though we do, but because we see each other. Really see each other. The good, the bad, the scared, the stupid, all of it. Is that enough? Seeing clearly? I don't know. But it's a better foundation than whatever we were building on before. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching people walk by outside. Normal people with normal problems, couples who'd never had to rebuild their entire relationship from scratch, families who'd never questioned whether love was enough to overcome betrayal. I have something to tell you, Sarah said suddenly. My stomach dropped. Even after 6 months of rebuilding, my nervous system still went to DEFCON 1 whenever she said those words. Okay. I've been thinking about the wedding. What about it? I want to do it again. I stared at her. What? Not now. Not soon. But someday, when we're ready, I want to marry you again. For real this time. With no secrets, no backup plans, no escape routes. I want to stand in front of everyone we love and promise to be your wife, and I want to mean it completely. Sarah. I know it sounds crazy. I know it's asking too much. But that day, our wedding day, it was beautiful, David. And I ruined it. I turned what should have been the beginning of our life together into the end of your ability to trust me. I want to give you a new wedding day. One that's actually about us. I didn't know what to say. The idea was simultaneously terrifying and deeply appealing. A do-over. A chance to reclaim what had been stolen from us. What would be different? I asked. Everything. I'd write different vows, honest ones. I'd invite different people, only the ones who actually support us. I'd mean every word I said instead of hoping I could learn to mean them later. She reached across the table and took my hand. And I'd marry you because I choose you, not because I'm too scared to choose anyone else. That's a big promise. It's the only promise that matters. I looked at this woman across from me, my wife, my ex-wife, my maybe future wife, and saw something I'd never seen before our wedding imploded. Complete certainty. Not the desperate certainty of someone trying to convince herself, but the quiet certainty of someone who finally knew her own mind. Ask me again in a year, I said. Really? Really? If we're still doing this dance in a year, if we're still choosing each other every day, if I can look at you and feel safe. Ask me again. And if you say yes? Then we'll plan the smallest, most honest wedding in the history of marriage. Just us, the people who've stuck by us through this mess, and promises we know we can keep. Sarah smiled, and for the first time since our original wedding day, it was completely unguarded. I love you, David. The real you, not the fantasy version I married the first time. I love you too. The real you. Even the parts of you that are capable of breaking my heart. Especially those parts? No, I said honestly. But I love you despite those parts. And maybe that's more honest than especially. 9 months later, I was sitting in the same coffee shop, but at a different table. Sarah was 20 minutes late, which would have sent me into a spiral of paranoid assumptions 6 months ago. Now I just figured she was stuck in traffic or dealing with a work crisis. My phone buzzed with a text, so sorry. Client meeting ran over. Be there in 10. Order me the usual? Red heart emoji. I smiled and went to the counter. The barista knew our order by heart now. We'd become regulars, part of the coffee shop ecosystem. Latte for her, black coffee for me, 1 chocolate croissant to split. David. I turned to see Marcus standing behind me in line. The world didn't end. I didn't feel rage or betrayal or even surprise. Mostly, I felt nothing. Like seeing an actor from a TV show you used to watch but hadn't thought about in years. Marcus. I nodded politely and turned back to the barista. Can we talk? I paid for my order and stepped aside. What about? He looked terrible. Thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and the general air of someone who'd been making poor life choices for an extended period. I owe you an apology. A real one. No, you don't. Yes, I do. What I did was unforgivable. I betrayed our friendship, I destroyed your marriage, Marcus. I held up a hand. You didn't destroy my marriage. Sarah and I did that together, through poor communication and unmet expectations and her decision to look for something outside instead of working on something inside. You were a symptom, not a cause. He blinked, clearly not expecting that response. That doesn't make what you did okay, I continued. But it makes it smaller. Less significant. You were never important enough to destroy my life, even when I thought you were. I heard you guys are working things out. We are. That's good. I'm glad. Sarah's a good person. She just got confused. I studied his face, looking for signs of the man I'd once considered a brother. He was still there, buried under guilt and poor decisions and what looked like a serious drinking problem. How are you doing, Marcus? Really, honestly? Terrible. I lost my best friend, I hurt the woman I thought I loved, I destroyed a marriage, and for what? A 2-day fling in Bali before I realized I'd made the biggest mistake of my life? You realized that pretty quickly. I realized at the moment I saw how devastated Sarah was when she found out about the cancellations. She wasn't devastated because she couldn't have her luxury vacation. She was devastated because she understood, maybe for the first time, what she'd actually done to you. And I looked at her crying in that hotel lobby and thought, this is what I chose over 20 years of friendship? This broken woman who's in love with someone else? I felt something I hadn't expected, pity. Sarah wasn't in love with you, I said gently. She was in love with the idea of not having to grow up. You represented a life where she could stay exactly as she was instead of becoming who she needed to be. That's not your fault, Marcus. That's just who she was at the time. And now? Now she's someone different. Someone who chooses growth over comfort, honesty over ease. Someone who's earned the right to be trusted again. Marcus nodded slowly. Do you think there's any chance we could ever be friends again? Not now, I know it's too soon, but someday? I thought about it honestly. The rage was gone, the sense of betrayal had faded, but something else had taken their place, indifference. Marcus had been important to me once, but that person felt like someone from a different lifetime. I don't think so, I said, not unkindly. Not because I can't forgive you, but because forgiveness doesn't require rebuilding. I forgive you for being weak and selfish and making terrible choices. But I don't miss you anymore, Marcus. I don't wonder what you're doing or wish you were in my life. I've moved on completely. He looked like I'd hit him, but he nodded. I understand. I hope you figure things out, I said, and meant it. I hope you become someone you can be proud of. But that journey doesn't include me. David? Sarah's voice came from behind me. She'd arrived while we were talking, and now stood a few feet away, looking uncertain. Hey, I said, turning to her with a smile. Your latte's getting cold. She looked between Marcus and me, clearly trying to gauge the emotional temperature of the encounter. "Marcus," she said coolly. "Sarah." He looked at her with something like longing, and I realized he was still carrying a torch for a woman who'd never really existed. "You look good." "Happy." "I am happy." "I'm glad." "You deserve to be happy." Sarah moved closer to me, not possessively but naturally, like a person gravitating toward safety and warmth. "We should go," she said softly. I nodded and picked up our drinks. "Take care of yourself, Marcus." As we walked away, I felt Sarah's tension in the way she held herself. "Are you okay?" she asked once we were outside. "Completely fine. Are you?" "I think so. It was just weird seeing him. He looked so sad." "He is sad. But that's not our responsibility anymore." Sarah stopped walking and turned to face me. "You handled that incredibly well. A year ago, I think you would have punched him. A year ago, I might have. But a year ago, he still had power over my life. Now he's just a guy who made bad choices and has to live with them." "Is that how you see me? Someone who made bad choices?" I took her hand. "I see you as someone who made bad choices and then did the incredibly hard work of making better ones. That's not the same thing at all." We walked to her apartment in comfortable silence. 9 months of rebuilding had taught us both the value of processing things quietly before talking them through. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said as we climbed the stairs to her place. "Always." "Are you ready?" "Ready for what?" "To move back in together. To try being married again instead of just dating while married." I thought about it. Was I ready? Ready to wake up next to her every morning, to share space and schedules and the mundane intimacy of daily life? Ready to stop treating our relationship like something fragile that might break at any moment? "Yeah," I said, surprising myself with how certain I felt. "I think I am." "Really?" "Really. On one condition." "What?" "We get new furniture. New bed, new couch, new everything. I want to build a home together, not move back into the museum of our old life." Sarah grinned. "Can we paint the walls too? I always hated that beige." "We can paint them hot pink if you want. As long as we choose the color together." She kissed me then, right there in the hallway outside her apartment, and it felt like coming home and starting over at the same time. "I love you, David. The real you. The you who forgives without forgetting, who trusts without being naive, who chose to rebuild instead of walking away. I love you too. The you who faced the worst thing about yourself and decided to become someone better." We went inside to start planning our future, again, but different, and maybe this time, for real. Time will tell. It always does. But for the first time since our wedding day exploded in my face, I was genuinely excited to find out. Story 3.
My mother created a bloodline purification system in which underperforming children had their DNA corrected through experimental procedures. I watched my brother disappear into the laboratory wing of our house after receiving a B+ and returned 3 days later speaking only in mathematical equations. I need to tell you something, and I need you to believe me, even though it sounds completely insane. My mother wasn't just a helicopter parent, she was running illegal genetic experiments on her own children in the basement of our suburban home, and I'm pretty sure she murdered my little brother. There. I said it. The worst part? For 16 years, I thought this was normal. I thought every family had a laboratory wing behind the laundry room. I thought every kid got their blood drawn weekly for health monitoring. I thought everyone's mom wore latex gloves to tuck them in at night. You want to know when I realized something was wrong? When my best friend Sarah came over for the first time in 8th grade and asked why our house smelled like antiseptic and why there were biohazard disposal bins in the hallway. "Oh," I said, as casually as discussing the weather, "that's just mom's work stuff." Sarah's face went white. "Your mom works from home?" "Yeah, she's a genetic researcher. She studies bloodline optimization." The way Sarah backed toward the door, you'd think I'd told her my mom was a serial killer. Which, looking back, might not have been far from the truth. Let me start from the beginning, because this story doesn't make sense unless you understand how perfectly normal everything seemed when you're living inside it. Dr. Eleanor Whitmore, that's my mother, was brilliant. Not just smart, but the kind of brilliant that makes other brilliant people feel stupid. She had 3 PhDs, spoke 7 languages, and could solve complex mathematical theorems while making dinner. She'd been recruited by every major research university in the country, but she chose to work from home after I was born. "Family comes first," she'd say, stroking my hair with those ever-present latex gloves. "My greatest experiment is right here." Our house looked normal from the outside, Colonial style, white picket fence, perfectly manicured lawn. But step inside, and you'd notice things. The air purification systems humming in every room. The way certain doors required keycards to open. The fact that we had a medical-grade refrigerator next to the regular one, filled with vials and specimens. Mom homeschooled my brother Kevin and me, which seemed reasonable since she was overqualified to teach anything we could possibly need to learn. But her curriculum was intense. We studied genetics before we learned multiplication. We could identify DNA-based pairs before we could tie our shoes. And every lesson somehow related back to what she called hereditary potential maximization. Children, she'd say during our morning lectures, you carry within yourselves the accumulated wisdom and strength of thousands of ancestors. But sometimes, that genetic information becomes corrupted. Diluted? It's my job, our family's sacred duty, to ensure that corruption doesn't take root. Kevin and I would nod solemnly. At 8 and 6 years old respectively, we didn't question why our mom talked about DNA corruption like other parents talked about cavities. The testing started when I turned 7. Every Monday morning, before breakfast, we'd line up in Mom's laboratory for what she called progress evaluations. Blood draws, reflex tests, memory assessments, problem-solving exercises. She'd time everything, record everything, analyze everything. Margot, she'd say, reviewing my results on her computer screen, your spatial reasoning scores have improved by 12% this month. Excellent genetic expression. Then she'd turn to Kevin. Sweet, dreamy Kevin, who was more interested in drawing pictures of dragons than memorizing the periodic table. Kevin, we need to discuss your cognitive metrics. Your abstract thinking scores are concerning. Kevin would fidget in his chair, those big brown eyes looking confused and hurt. I tried really hard, Mom. Trying isn't enough when genetics are involved. But don't worry, Mommy knows how to fix this. The first time Kevin got corrected, I thought he just had the flu. He'd been struggling with fractions, earning what Mom called suboptimal performance markers. One evening, she took him down to the laboratory after dinner. I heard muffled sounds through the walls, mechanical humming, occasional beeps, Kevin crying softly. He emerged 3 days later pale and shaky, but his math scores improved dramatically. Mom was thrilled. You see? She told me privately. Sometimes our genetic coding just needs a little adjustment to reach its full potential. Kevin's neural pathways were blocking his mathematical abilities, but we cleared those blockages. I accepted this explanation because I was 10 years old and trusted my mother completely. Kevin seemed fine, better than fine, actually. His homework became perfect. His test scores soared. He stopped drawing dragons and started solving algebra problems for fun. The only weird thing was how he'd sometimes stop mid-sentence and stare at nothing, his lips moving silently as if he was calculating something invisible. The corrections became routine. Anytime either of us showed signs of what Mom called genetic underperformance, we'd spend a few days in the laboratory getting optimized. It was like going to the dentist, except instead of cleaning your teeth, she was apparently cleaning your DNA. I got corrected when I struggled with organic chemistry at age 12. The procedure left me with a splitting headache and strange dreams about molecular structures, but afterward I could visualize complex chemical bonds like they were painted in the air. Mom was so proud she cried. Kevin got corrected more frequently. His artistic tendencies kept resurfacing despite the treatments, which Mom found deeply troubling. Creativity without purpose is a genetic flaw, she'd explain while reviewing his latest brain scans. We need to redirect those neural resources toward more productive applications. After each correction, Kevin became more focused on mathematics and logic, but also more distant. He'd sit at the dinner table solving calculus problems instead of talking to us. He'd mutter formulas under his breath while watching TV. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at his hands like he didn't recognize them. But I didn't worry. Mom was fixing us, making us better, helping us reach our full potential. Or so I believed until the night I overheard her on the phone with someone she called the director. I was supposed to be asleep, but my bladder had other plans. As I tiptoed toward the bathroom, I heard Mom's voice drifting from her office, the real office, not the laboratory, the one with all her computers and research files. The initial subjects are responding well to the gene therapy protocols, she was saying. Subject A shows remarkable cognitive enhancement with minimal personality displacement. Subject B requires more intensive intervention, but we're seeing promising results in mathematical reasoning and pattern recognition. Subject A. Subject B. My blood went cold. She was talking about Kevin and me. Yes, sir, I understand the timeline pressure. The younger subjects integrate the modifications more successfully, so we need to complete the primary phase before they reach sexual maturity. No, sir, they don't suspect anything. They believe they're receiving medical treatment for learning disabilities. I pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering so loud I was sure she'd hear it. The preliminary data suggests we can enhance specific cognitive functions by up to 300% while suppressing undesirable traits like emotional volatility and creative distraction. Imagine entire generations optimized for logical thinking, problem solving, and compliance. Yes, sir, compliance is a crucial component. Can't have enhanced individuals questioning the system that created them. She laughed, a cold, clinical sound I'd never heard from her before. My own children are proof of concept. In 6 months, we'll be ready to begin the broader implementation. Operation Bloodline Purification will revolutionize human genetic potential. I made it back to my room without breathing, my mind reeling. Mom wasn't helping us reach our potential, she was experimenting on us. We were test subjects in some kind of massive genetic modification program. But the worst part was how normal it felt. Even knowing the truth, I still trusted her. Still believed she was doing what was best for us. That's what makes good manipulation so terrifying. By the time you recognize it, it's already rewired your brain. I started paying attention differently after that night. Really looking at what was happening in our house instead of just accepting it. The medical supplies that arrived every week weren't from regular pharmaceutical companies, they came in unmarked boxes with biohazard symbols. The computer system Mom used had encrypted files labeled things like Cognitive Enhancement Protocol 7 and Behavioral Modification Results, Batch 3. Her research notes mentioned other families, other children, success rates and failure rates. Failure rates? That phrase kept echoing in my head. What happened to the failures? Kevin was getting worse. Not academically, his test scores were now beyond genius level. But personally, he was disappearing. He'd forgotten how to laugh. He couldn't remember why he used to love drawing. When I asked him about his dragon pictures, he looked genuinely confused. Dragons are mathematical impossibilities, he said in that flat, analytical voice he developed. Their wing-to-body mass ratio couldn't generate sufficient lift. Why would I waste time drawing impossible things? Because they were fun, I said desperately. Remember? You used to say they were your friends. Kevin stared at me for a long moment, and for just a second, I thought I saw a flicker of the brother I'd lost. Then it was gone. Fun is an inefficient use of neural resources, he said. I need to finish my calculus homework. That night, I snuck into Mom's office and accessed her computer while she was in the laboratory. Her password was easy to guess, Bloodline 47. The files I found made me physically sick. There were records of dozens of children, all listed by number rather than name. Their before and after photos showed the same progression Kevin and I had experienced: bright, animated kids gradually becoming cold, calculating automatons. But some files were marked terminated in red letters. One file made my hands shake. Subject B7, Kevin Whitmore, iteration 23. 23 iterations. She'd been modifying my brother's brain 23 times. The notes for his next session were scheduled for the following week. Final optimization protocol. Complete suppression of creative neural pathways. Enhanced mathematical processing. Emotional regulation to zero baseline. Zero baseline meant no emotions. At all. She was going to erase everything left of my little brother. I had to warn Kevin, but talking to him had become like talking to a computer. He processed information, but he couldn't understand danger or fear or love anymore. Kevin, I said the next morning, trying to keep my voice steady, do you remember what you were like before the corrections started? He paused in solving a differential equation, his pencil hovering over the paper. I was genetically suboptimal. Mother fixed my cognitive deficiencies. But do you remember being happy? Another pause, longer this time. Something flickered behind his eyes, confusion, maybe, or the ghost of an emotion. I calculate that happiness is a biochemical response to positive stimuli. I don't understand why it would be relevant. Kevin, what if I told you that mom isn't helping us? What if she's hurting us? Now he looked directly at me, and I saw something that chilled me to the bone. His expression wasn't confused or hurt or angry. It was completely blank, like he was processing data. That statement contains logical inconsistencies, he said finally. Mother's interventions have optimized our cognitive performance. Genetic enhancement cannot be classified as harmful. He'd been so thoroughly reprogrammed that he couldn't even conceive of what was being done to him as wrong. That's when I realized I was on my own. I started planning Kevin's escape that same day, even though I knew he wouldn't cooperate willingly. Whatever was left of my brother was buried under layers of genetic modification, but maybe, if I could get him away from Mom's treatments, some of it could recover. The tricky part was that Mom monitored everything. She had cameras throughout the house, tracking devices in our clothes, even biometric sensors that could detect when our heart rates or brain activity changed. Escaping would require perfect timing and a lot of luck. I spent a week mapping her schedule, identifying the narrow window each evening when she'd be in the laboratory preparing the next day's experiments. During that time, the external doors were automatically locked, but I found the override code hidden in her desk drawer. On Thursday night, I made my move. Kevin, I whispered, shaking him awake. We need to leave. Now. He sat up immediately, alert despite having been asleep seconds before. The current time is 2:17 a.m. Our scheduled wake time is not for 5 hours and 43 minutes. Forget the schedule. Mom is going to hurt you tomorrow. She's going to take away everything that's left of who you used to be. Kevin processed this information with that eerie calm. Mother's procedures are beneficial genetic modifications. I do not require protection from improvement. I wanted to scream. Instead, I grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the door. I'm your sister, and I'm telling you we have to go. Trust me. He resisted, but not violently, more like he was following a programmed response. This behavior is outside acceptable parameters. I must inform Mother of this deviation. No. I clamped my hand over his mouth, and he looked at me with such cold confusion that my heart broke. Kevin, please. Please remember that you loved me once. For a moment, just a moment, something changed in his face. His eyes widened slightly, and he stopped trying to pull away. I remember, he whispered. Margot? Why do I feel strange? It was the first time he'd said my name like a person instead of a database entry. Whatever was happening, I had to move fast. We crept through the house toward the front door, and I was actually starting to believe we might make it when the lights flashed on. Going somewhere, children? Mom stood at the top of the stairs, still in her laboratory coat, her face a mask of disappointed authority. In her hand was a small remote device, probably connected to the house's security system. Margot, she said, walking slowly down the stairs, I'm very disappointed. I thought your recent corrections had eliminated this kind of irrational behavior. You've been experimenting on us, I said, trying to keep my voice strong even though my legs were shaking. We're not your research subjects, we're your children. Mom's expression didn't change. You are both. The two categories are not mutually exclusive. She turned to Kevin, who was swaying slightly, his hand pressed to his forehead like he was fighting a headache. Kevin, come here. You're experiencing a neurological conflict between your optimized neural pathways and residual emotional programming. We need to correct this immediately. Kevin took a step toward her, then stopped. I don't want to be corrected anymore. The words came out broken and confused, like he was fighting against his own mind to say them. Mom's eyes narrowed. Kevin, you are malfunctioning. Report to the laboratory for immediate adjustment. No, Kevin said, and the simple word seemed to cost him enormous effort. I want to draw dragons again. Mom's face finally showed emotion, cold fury. I see the problem, she said, raising the remote device. Margot, your presence is triggering an emotional cascade in Kevin's brain chemistry. This is why siblings shouldn't be housed together during the final optimization phases. She pressed a button on the remote, and Kevin collapsed to the floor, convulsing. Some kind of neural disruptor, probably activated through the implants she'd put in our heads during the corrections. Stop it. I lunged toward her, but she pressed another button and I felt electricity shoot through my own brain. The world went white-hot with pain, and I fell beside Kevin. Phase 1 of your development is complete, Mom said, standing over us as we writhed on the floor. But clearly, Phase 2 needs to begin ahead of schedule. Emotional attachments are a serious design flaw. The last thing I saw before losing consciousness was Kevin reaching for my hand, his eyes filled with tears and confusion and something that looked almost like the brother I remembered. I woke up strapped to a medical table in Mom's laboratory. The room was bigger than I'd realized, filled with equipment that belonged in a major research hospital rather than a suburban basement. Computer monitors displayed brain scans and genetic sequences. 4 stands held bags of unknown fluids. And in the center of it all was another table where Kevin lay unconscious, his head covered in monitoring electrodes. You're awake. Good. Mom appeared beside me, now wearing full surgical scrubs. I was hoping you'd be conscious for this part. I want you to understand what's happening. Let Kevin go, I said, though the words came out slurred from whatever drugs she'd given me. Do whatever you want to me, but let him go. Mom laughed, that same clinical sound I'd heard during her phone call. Kevin is the success story, dear. Look at his progression charts. She gestured to a wall of monitors showing Kevin's brain activity over time. I could see how the patterns had changed with each correction, the wild, chaotic beauty of natural thought gradually becoming rigid, mathematical, controlled. By tomorrow morning, Kevin will be completely optimized. No more emotional volatility, no more creative distractions, no more inefficient neural pathways. He'll be a perfect example of human genetic potential. He'll be dead inside, I whispered. He'll be perfect, Mom corrected. And so will you, eventually. Though your optimization will take longer since you've been resistant to the process. She moved to a computer terminal and began entering commands. The director is very pleased with our results. Kevin will be the first of his generation to achieve complete cognitive optimization. The other test sites haven't been nearly as successful. Other test sites? Oh, yes. Operation Bloodline Purification is much larger than our little family experiment. There are dozens of families participating, hundreds of children being optimized. Soon, we'll have enough perfected individuals to begin the next phase, replacing the existing population with genetically superior specimens. The casual way she discussed mass genetic manipulation made my stomach turn. This wasn't just about Kevin and me, she was part of something enormous and terrifying. But first, Mom continued, we need to address your resistance to optimization. Your brain keeps rejecting the modifications, clinging to these primitive emotional responses. So tonight, we're going to try a more direct approach. She held up a surgical instrument I didn't recognize, something that looked like a cross between a scalpel and a computer chip. Direct neural implantation. Instead of relying on genetic therapy to modify your brain chemistry, we'll simply install new neural pathways. Much more reliable, though significantly more invasive. The monitors around Kevin's table began beeping faster. His brain activity was spiking, showing patterns of intense distress even though he remained unconscious. Interesting, Mom murmured, studying his readings. Kevin appears to be fighting the final optimization protocol. His subconscious mind is resisting the emotional suppression programming. Kevin's fingers began twitching, and I could see his eyes moving rapidly beneath his closed lids. Kevin. I called out. Kevin, wake up. Fight it. Stop that, Mom snapped, adjusting something on my restraints that sent a mild electric shock through my body. You're interfering with his neural stabilization. But Kevin was stirring, his head turning toward my voice even as the electrodes monitored his brain patterns. Margot? He whispered, his voice sounding more human than it had in months. Where? Where are we? The laboratory, I said quickly before Mom could stop me. Kevin, she's trying to erase your mind completely. You have to fight it? Kevin's eyes opened, and for the first time since his corrections began, they looked truly alive. Confused and frightened, but alive. I remember things, he said slowly. Dragons. Drawing. Laughing with you. But they feel like someone else's memories. They're your memories, I said desperately. That's who you really are, not this mathematical robot she's turned you into. Mom moved swiftly to Kevin's table, checking his restraints and the fourth feeding drugs into his system. Kevin, you're experiencing a temporary neurological conflict. The memories you're accessing are corrupted data from your pre-optimization state. They're not real. But Kevin was looking at his hands, the same way he'd been doing for weeks, except now his expression was filled with wonder instead of confusion. I used to draw with these hands, he said. I remember drawing a dragon family. There was a mother dragon and a father dragon and two little dragons who went on adventures together. His voice was getting stronger, more animated. Whatever was happening in his brain, he was fighting back against years of genetic modification. The little dragons got in trouble sometimes, Kevin continued, his eyes meeting mine, but they always protected each other. Mom grabbed a syringe from a nearby tray and jabbed it into Kevin's foreline. Enough. We're increasing the neural suppression drugs. No. I threw my weight against the restraints holding me to the table, ignoring the electric shocks that punishment system sent through my body. Kevin, don't let her take you away again. Kevin's eyes were already starting to glaze over from whatever Mom had injected, but he managed to speak before the drugs took full effect. Margot. Get out of here. Find help. Tell people what she's doing. Kevin. But he was slipping back into unconsciousness, the monitors showing his brain activity returning to those flat, mathematical patterns. Mom turned back to me, holding the surgical implant device. Touching as that was, it only confirms that we need to move to direct neural modification. Kevin's consciousness is more resilient than anticipated, but yours won't be after tonight. She moved toward my table, and I realized with crystal clarity that I was about to become another success story in Operation Bloodline Purification. In a few hours, I'd be just as empty and controlled as Kevin, just as perfectly optimized and soulless. That's when the fire alarms started blaring. Mom froze, the surgical device halfway to my head. The laboratory's computer systems began flashing emergency warnings, and the smell of smoke drifted through the ear vents. What the? She rushed to her security monitors, frantically checking camera feeds from throughout the house. The screen showed flames spreading rapidly through the upper floors. But these weren't accidental house fires, they were too organized, too strategic. Someone was systematically burning down our home. The director's people? Mom muttered, but she looked more confused than informed. The timeline wasn't supposed to. An explosion somewhere above us shook dust from the ceiling, and several of Mom's computer screens went dark. The carefully controlled environment of her laboratory was becoming chaotic. Who's doing this? She demanded, as if I had answers. But I was staring at Kevin. The shock of the explosion had caused his restraints to loosen slightly, and his eyes were open again, watching the emergency lights flash across the ceiling. Kevin, I whispered, can you move? He turned his head toward me, and I saw something in his expression I hadn't seen in years: determination. The restraint mechanism uses an electromagnetic lock, he said quietly, his voice mixing his new analytical abilities with his returning personality. The power fluctuations from the fire are causing intermittent failures. As if to prove his point, his restraints clicked open. Kevin sat up slowly, pulling electrodes off his head. Mom spun around from her monitors. Kevin. Lie back down immediately. But Kevin wasn't the compliant subject she'd created anymore. He looked at her with a mixture of scientific curiosity and something approaching anger. You killed me, he said simply. Not my body, my mind, my personality, everything that made me who I was. You murdered your own son and replaced him with a machine. I improved you, Mom snapped, reaching for a control device. I gave you capabilities beyond normal human limitations. You gave me nothing, Kevin replied, working at my restraints with hands that were steady despite his recent drug injection. You took everything away and left behind an algorithm that happened to share my DNA. My restraints released, and I sat up, feeling dizzy but functional. Around us, the laboratory was filling with smoke as the fire spread downward through the house. Mom was frantically trying to salvage data from her computers, downloading files onto portable drives. Years of research, she muttered. Decades of optimization protocols. Mom, I said, and she turned toward me with wild eyes. Just stop. It's over. Over? She laughed hysterically. This is just one facility. There are dozens of others. Hundreds of children being optimized as we speak. Even if I lose this data, the program continues. Kevin moved to stand beside me, and for the first time in months, he looked like my brother again. "We're leaving," he said. Mom raised the control device, probably to activate our neural implants, but Kevin was faster than she expected. All those months of optimization had enhanced his reflexes, even if they'd suppressed his emotions. He knocked the device from her hand before she could trigger it. "The stairs are compromised," he said, studying the smoke patterns. "But there's an emergency exit through the storm cellar." We moved toward a door I'd never noticed before, hidden behind a wall of filing cabinets. As Kevin worked to open it, Mom made one last desperate attempt to stop us. "You don't understand what you're doing," she screamed over the sound of sirens approaching outside. "Without optimization, humanity will stagnate. We'll remain prisoners of our own genetic limitations." "I was trying to save our species. You were trying to destroy it," Kevin said without looking back. "Evolution isn't about perfection, it's about diversity, adaptation, survival through variation. Your optimization would have created a species with no ability to grow or change." The hidden door opened to reveal a narrow tunnel leading upward. Kevin gestured for me to go first, but I paused. "What about her?" I asked, looking back at Mom. She was still frantically downloading data, even as the smoke grew thicker. "I won't leave my work," she said. 20 years of research. I can rebuild, start over." Kevin's hand on my shoulder was gentle but firm. "She made her choice a long time ago," he said. "We can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved." We climbed through the tunnel and emerged in our backyard, gasping in the clean night air. Fire trucks were pulling up to the house, and I could see neighbors gathering on the street, watching our childhood home burn. Behind us, the house exploded as the fire reached Mom's chemical storage areas. The laboratory where we'd spent so many hours being optimized vanished in seconds. Kevin put his arm around me as we watched the flames consume everything we'd known. "Do you think she got out?" I asked. Kevin was quiet for a long moment. "I calculate a 12% probability of survival if she remained in the laboratory," he said. Then, in a softer voice that sounded more like the brother I remembered, "But honestly, I think she chose to go down with her experiments." A paramedic approached us, asking if we needed medical attention. As Kevin explained that we were fine, I found myself studying his face in the firelight. He still had that analytical way of speaking, still processed information with inhuman speed and accuracy. The genetic modifications couldn't be completely undone. But his eyes were warm again. His voice carried emotion. When he looked at me, I saw love instead of data processing. "Are you okay?" I asked him as the paramedic moved on. Kevin considered the question with characteristic thoroughness. "I remember being a completely different person," he said finally. "And I remember being no person at all, just a collection of optimized responses. Now I'm something in between, and I'm not sure what that makes me." He looked down at his hands again, but this time he smiled slightly. "But I remember dragons. And I remember loving my sister. So maybe that's enough to build from." The official investigation concluded that Dr. Eleanor Whitmore died in an accidental house fire caused by improperly stored chemicals. Her research was classified as experimental psychology, and the laboratory was described as a home therapy space for her learning disabled children. Kevin and I were placed with our aunt in Oregon, far from the ashes of our old life. The investigators found some of Mom's research files, but without context, they looked like academic papers on cognitive enhancement rather than documentation of illegal human experimentation. We never told anyone the whole truth. Who would believe us? And honestly, we wanted to forget as much as we wanted people to know. Kevin struggled for months with what he called cognitive dissonance, his enhanced analytical abilities conflicting with his recovering emotions. But slowly, gradually, he began to integrate both parts of himself. He's still brilliant, still capable of mathematical insights that border on the supernatural. But now he uses those abilities by choice, not programming. He also started drawing again. His dragons are more complex now, rendered with perfect mathematical precision but filled with the wonder and imagination that Mom tried so hard to erase. They're beautiful and impossible, just like the brother she nearly killed and who somehow survived. As for me, I spend a lot of time wondering about those dozens of other facilities Mom mentioned. Hundreds of children being optimized. I've tried researching, looking for traces of Operation Bloodline Purification, but either it's too well hidden or it died with her. Sometimes I think I see them, though. Kids who seem too perfect, too controlled, too analytical. Children who speak like computers and never laugh. I wonder if they have siblings desperately trying to save them, or if they're already too far gone. I wonder if somewhere, right now, another mother is explaining to her children that creativity without purpose is a genetic flaw. And I wonder if there are other kids like Kevin and me, carrying the scars and gifts of genetic optimization, trying to figure out how to be human when someone spent years systematically making us less than human. If you're reading this and it sounds familiar, if your parent talks about maximizing genetic potential, or if your little brother stopped laughing after his last medical treatment, please know that you're not alone. And please know that whatever they've done to your mind, whatever they've taken away or changed or optimized, there's still something purely, essentially you underneath all of it. Kevin proves that every day. He's not the same person he was before Mom's experiments, but he's not her creation either. He's something new, something that couldn't exist without both his original personality and his enhanced abilities. He's living proof that love and individuality and hope can survive even the most systematic attempts to destroy them. The human spirit, it turns out, is remarkably resistant to optimization. Kevin is in college now, studying bioethics and genetic therapy. He wants to understand what was done to us from a scientific perspective, and more importantly, he wants to prevent it from happening to other children. His professors think he's just another brilliant student. They have no idea he's a survivor of the very thing he's studying. I'm studying journalism, because I believe in the power of telling true stories. Someday, when I'm ready, I'm going to investigate Operation Bloodline Purification properly. I'm going to find out how widespread it really was, and I'm going to make sure the world knows what people like our mother did in the name of genetic improvement. But for now, I'm content to watch Kevin draw dragons and remember what it means to be human. Last week, he showed me a new picture he'd been working on, a family of dragons flying away from a burning castle. The mother and father dragons were in the distance, but the two young ones were flying together, side by side, their wings almost touching. Do you think they'll be okay? I asked, studying the complex mathematics of their flight patterns and the pure emotion in their expressions. Kevin smiled, and the expression was perfectly, beautifully, optimally human. They'll be fine, he said. They have each other. But that's not really the end of our story. Because 3 months after Kevin drew that picture, I found evidence that Operation Bloodline Purification didn't die with our mother. I was researching genetic therapy programs for a journalism assignment when I stumbled across a news article that made my blood freeze. A pharmaceutical company called Helix Industries had been shut down by federal investigators for unauthorized human trials involving minors. The article was buried on page 12 of a regional newspaper, the kind of story that gets minimal coverage because it sounds too crazy to be real. But I recognized the language. Cognitive enhancement protocols. Behavioral modification research. Hereditary optimization studies. I called the reporter who'd written the article, a woman named Janet Chen who worked for the Portland Tribune. When I told her I had personal experience with similar research, she agreed to meet me at a coffee shop near my college. Janet was younger than I'd expected, maybe 30, with the kind of sharp, skeptical eyes that come from investigating stories nobody wants to believe. You said you had experience with genetic modification research? She asked, settling into our corner booth with a recorder and notepad. I'd practiced this conversation a dozen times, but actually saying the words out loud was harder than I'd expected. My mother was conducting illegal genetic experiments on my brother and me, I said. She called it bloodline purification. She was part of something bigger, a program called Operation Bloodline Purification. Janet's pen stopped moving. Can you prove that? My brother is living proof. And I have some of her research files that survived the fire. Kevin had been reluctant to go public, but when I showed him the article about Helix Industries, his expression changed. The analytical part of his brain started processing connections and probabilities, while the human part got angry. How many other children? He'd ask quietly. How many other kids like us are out there? That's what convinced him to help me reach out to Janet Chen. Over the next several weeks, Janet and I worked together to uncover the scope of what our mother had been involved in. It was worse than I'd imagined. Helix Industries had been operating 17 family therapy centers across the country, targeting children with learning disabilities or behavioral issues. Parents thought they were enrolling their kids in cutting-edge treatment programs. In reality, they were volunteering their children for genetic modification experiments. The federal investigation had uncovered evidence of systematic cognitive manipulation, unauthorized medical procedures, and something the reports called personality restructuring protocols. Dozens of families had been affected. Some children had died from complications during the procedures. Others had survived but were left permanently changed. The scary part, Janet told me during one of our research sessions, is how willing the parents were to participate. These weren't evil people, they were desperate parents who wanted to help their struggling children. The researchers convinced them that genetic optimization was the future of child development. Kevin and I weren't the only survivors, but we were among the lucky ones. Many of the children who'd undergone similar procedures had been left in vegetative states or with severe brain damage. A few had simply disappeared from the program entirely, their families told they'd been transferred to specialized facilities. We never found out what happened to those missing children. Janet's investigation eventually led to a series of articles that won her a state journalism award and got picked up by national news outlets. The story sparked congressional hearings about oversight of genetic research involving minors. Several government officials resigned. Reform legislation was passed. But the people who'd funded and directed Operation Bloodline Purification were never caught. The trail went cold at a network of shell companies and overseas accounts. Whoever the director was, the person my mother had been reporting to, they'd covered their tracks well. Kevin testified before Congress about his experiences. Watching him describe what our mother had done to him, speaking in that precise, analytical way but with genuine emotion underneath, was one of the hardest things I've ever experienced. The goal of the program, he told the senators, was to create a generation of children who were intellectually enhanced but emotionally compliant. We were supposed to be smarter, more capable, but also more obedient and less likely to question authority. The perfect citizens for a society that values productivity over humanity. When one senator asked if he considered himself a victim, Kevin paused for a long time. "I consider myself a survivor," he said finally. "What was done to me was wrong, but it also gave me abilities I wouldn't otherwise have. The question isn't whether I'm a victim, it's whether society will learn from what happened to children like me, or whether it will find new ways to treat kids as experiments instead of people." After the hearings, we started getting contacted by other survivors. Children who'd been through similar programs, now grown up and trying to understand what had been done to them. Some were like Kevin, enhanced but human. Others were more damaged, struggling with the cognitive dissonance between their modified minds and their recovering personalities. We formed an informal support network, meeting online and occasionally in person. We called ourselves the Optimized, a bitter joke that became a badge of survival. Through this network, we learned that Operation Bloodline Purification had been even more extensive than the congressional investigation revealed. There were survivors in other countries, children who'd been subjected to different experimental protocols, families who'd been told their kids had died when really they'd been sent to secondary research facilities. The more we learned, the more obvious it became that our mother hadn't been a mad scientist operating in isolation. She'd been part of a coordinated international effort to fundamentally alter human cognitive development. And according to some of the survivors we met, that effort was still ongoing. Marcus was a survivor from Texas whose parents had enrolled him in what they thought was a summer program for gifted children. He'd undergone procedures similar to Kevin's, but with a focus on suppressing empathy rather than creativity. They wanted to create perfect soldiers, he told us during one of our video calls. Kids who could make tactical decisions without being hindered by emotional responses to violence or suffering. Marcus had retained most of his analytical enhancements but struggled with forming emotional connections. He could understand, intellectually, that he loved his wife and children, but he couldn't feel it the way normal people did. "The worst part," he said, "is that sometimes I think they succeeded. When I see footage of war or natural disasters, I find myself analyzing casualty statistics instead of feeling sympathy for the victims. I have to consciously remind myself to care about human suffering." Sarah was from a facility in Colorado that had focused on memory manipulation. She could remember facts and information with perfect clarity, but many of her childhood memories before the treatments were fragmented or completely gone. I know I had a best friend named Amy, she told us. I found pictures of us together, letters she wrote me. But I can't remember her face or what she was like. It's like someone deleted all the warm, personal memories and left only the academic ones. These conversations were heartbreaking, but they also gave us a sense of purpose. We weren't just survivors, we were witnesses. People who could testify to what happens when science removes ethics and treats children as raw material for improvement. Kevin started a nonprofit organization called the Cognitive Liberty Institute, dedicated to protecting children from unauthorized genetic and neurological research. I became a freelance investigative journalist, specializing in stories about medical ethics and human experimentation. Together, we've exposed 3 more research programs similar to Operation Bloodline Purification. Each time, we find the same pattern: desperate parents, children with learning differences, researchers promising miraculous improvements, and devastating consequences for families who trust the wrong people. The hardest cases are the children who are still undergoing treatment. Their parents genuinely believe they're helping their kids, and the children themselves often can't articulate what's wrong. How do you convince a mother that the doctor who's been improving her son's autism symptoms is actually erasing his personality? How do you explain to a father that his daughter's sudden academic success comes at the cost of her ability to form friendships? We've learned to look for warning signs, treatment programs that require residential stays, researchers who discourage family involvement, therapy that focuses on optimizing rather than supporting a child's natural development. We've created resources for parents, guides for identifying legitimate treatment versus exploitation. But we can't save everyone. For every child we help, there are probably dozens more being subjected to procedures we'll never hear about until it's too late. The thing that keeps me awake at night is knowing that somewhere out there, right now, there's probably a little kid like Kevin was, creative, imaginative, wonderfully human, being told that their natural way of thinking is a problem that needs to be fixed. And tomorrow, that kid might wake up unable to remember why they used to love drawing dragons. Kevin handles the weight of this knowledge better than I do. His enhanced analytical abilities let him process the scope of the problem without becoming overwhelmed by the emotional implications. But sometimes, late at night when he thinks I'm not paying attention, I catch him drawing the same picture over and over: 2 small dragons flying away from a burning castle, their wings almost touching, heading toward an uncertain but hopeful future. We're still flying, Kevin and I, still figuring out how to be human in a world that sometimes seems determined to optimize the humanity out of children. Still learning that survival isn't just about escaping the people who hurt you, it's about making sure they can't hurt anyone else. Our mother thought she was creating perfect children. Instead, she created 2 imperfect adults who refused to let her legacy continue. And maybe, in the end, that's the most human thing of all, turning our scars into shields for others, transforming our survival into resistance. The optimization protocols failed to account for one crucial variable: love is a feature, not a bug. And no amount of genetic modification can completely erase the bonds between people who choose to protect each other. We're living proof that the human spirit is, indeed, remarkably resistant to optimization.
Story 4.
On my daughter's 15th birthday, my sister gave her a Dior perfume that she had stolen, then framed her and had her arrested for shoplifting. My mom gave a false statement to police, claiming, "I saw her slip it into her bag when no one was looking." I didn't say a word, I just picked her up from the police station, where she was in tears. 3 days later, I did this. My sister hasn't stopped crying since, and my mom is begging me to stop. I destroyed my sister's life in 3 days, and honestly, she deserved every second of it. You're probably thinking I'm some kind of monster right now, but let me tell you what happened on my daughter's 15th birthday. Let me tell you about the gift that changed everything, and why I'm sitting here at 2 a.m., watching my phone buzz with increasingly desperate texts from my mother, feeling absolutely no guilt whatsoever. It started with a bottle of Miss Dior perfume. Emma had been dropping hints about that specific fragrance for months. Not subtle hints, either. She'd spray it at Sephora every time we went to the mall, she'd show me Instagram posts of girls her age wearing it, she even put a printout of the bottle on our refrigerator with birthday wish written in purple marker across the top. The thing costs $150, which isn't pocket change for a single mom like me, but for my baby's 15th. I'd been saving up, skipping lunches at work and buying generic groceries to make it happen. The party was small. Just family, really. My sister Diane brought her usual chaos, late, loud, and somehow managing to make everything about herself within the first 10 minutes. She swept into our living room with this massive gift bag, the kind you get at expensive boutiques, and made this big show of presenting it to Emma like she was bestowing some royal favor. "Auntie Diane always gets the best presents," she announced, winking at Emma like they shared some special bond. Which they didn't. Diane barely remembered Emma's birthday most years, usually showing up empty-handed with some excuse about her car breaking down or her paycheck being delayed. Emma's face lit up when she pulled out the Miss Dior. The exact same bottle that had been haunting my dreams and my budget for months. The same fragrance I'd been planning to surprise her with, if I could swing the finances after next week's paycheck. "Oh my gosh, Aunt Diane, this is exactly what I wanted." Emma hugged the bottle to her chest, and I watched my sister bask in the praise like she was accepting an Oscar for Best Supporting Aunt. My mom, who was helping serve cake, stopped mid-slice. "Diane, honey, that's awfully generous. Those bottles are expensive." There was something in her voice I couldn't quite place. Not suspicion, exactly, but wariness? Like she knew something I didn't. Diane just shrugged, that careless gesture she's been making since we were kids whenever anyone questioned her about anything. "Emma deserves the best. Besides, I got a great deal on it. You know how good I am at finding bargains." Something cold settled in my stomach, the way it does when you hear a lie so casual it almost sounds believable. Diane hasn't held a steady job in 2 years. She's been bouncing between my mom's couch and various boyfriends' apartments, always asking for money, always promising she'll pay it back next week when her next opportunity comes through. There was no way she could afford a $150 bottle of perfume, deal or no deal. But Emma was so happy. Radiant, really. She sprayed a little on her wrists and behind her ears, dancing around the living room with this dreamy smile like she'd just discovered she was princess of some magical kingdom. It was her 15th birthday, and she felt beautiful and grown up and special. How could I ruin that with my paranoid suspicions about my sister's finances? So I said nothing. I swallowed my doubts, smiled at my daughter's joy, and told myself I was being unfairly judgmental. Maybe Diane had gotten her act together. Maybe she found some legitimate way to afford nice things. Maybe I was just jealous that she'd managed to get Emma the one gift she really wanted while I was still counting pennies. 3 days later, the police showed up at my door. I was making breakfast when I heard the knock. Not the casual rat-a-tat-tat of friends or delivery drivers, but that heavy, official pounding that makes your blood pressure spike and your hands go cold before you even know why. The kind of knock that means someone's life is about to change and not for the better. 2 officers stood on my porch. The younger one, maybe late 20s with kind eyes, looked uncomfortable, like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. The older one had the stone-faced expression of someone who'd delivered bad news 1,000 times before and had learned to build walls around whatever empathy he might have once felt. "Ma'am, we need to speak with you about your daughter, Emma Rodriguez." My world tilted sideways. Emma was at school. Safe in her second period chemistry class, probably taking notes about molecular structures or whatever 15-year-olds learn in chemistry. What could she possibly have done that would bring police to my door? "There's been an accusation of shoplifting. We need to bring her in for questioning." The words hit me like physical blows, each one landing with sickening precision. Shoplifting? My Emma, who still felt guilty about the time she accidentally took a pack of gum from the grocery store when she was 7 and made me drive back to return it with a handwritten apology note. There has to be some mistake. Emma wouldn't. She doesn't steal things. The older officer checked his notepad with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd heard variations of this conversation hundreds of times. Miss Dior perfume, valued at $150. Stolen from Nordstrom 3 days ago. We have witness statements and security footage that places your daughter at the scene. 3 days ago. Emma's birthday. The day my sister had given her that exact perfume as a gift. My hands started shaking before my brain caught up to what was happening. The perfume sitting on Emma's dresser upstairs. Diane's great deal. The timing was too perfect, too cruel to be coincidence. They let me drive Emma to the station myself, at least. Some small mercy in a day that was rapidly becoming a nightmare. I picked her up from school, watching her face crumble as I tried to explain what was happening without really understanding it myself. She kept saying, "But I didn't do anything, Mom. I didn't steal anything." Over and over, like a broken record, like if she said it enough times it would somehow make this whole nightmare stop, and we could go back to our normal Thursday afternoon routine. The ride to the police station was the longest 20 minutes of my life. Emma stared out the window, tears streaming silently down her cheeks, occasionally asking questions I couldn't answer. Why do they think I stole something? What's going to happen to me? Will I have to go to jail? Each question felt like a knife twisting in my chest. This was my baby girl, my straight-A student who volunteered at the animal shelter and still slept with a stuffed elephant named Mr. Peanuts. And somehow, some way, she was being accused of theft. At the police station, they separated us immediately. Put my 15-year-old daughter in a room with fluorescent lights and metal chairs while they asked her some questions. I sat in the waiting area, staring at motivational posters about community safety and crime prevention, feeling like I was drowning in some alternate reality where nothing made sense. The minutes crawled by. 20. 30. 45. I wanted to demand they let me in there, wanted to protect her from whatever they were asking, but I also knew that cooperating was probably our best chance of clearing this up quickly. When they finally let me see her, Emma was crying so hard she could barely breathe. Huge, gulping sobs that shook her entire body and made her words come out in broken fragments. The kind of crying that comes from having your world turned completely upside down by adults who were supposed to protect you. They said I stole it, Mom. They said there's video of me putting it in my bag, but I would never. She couldn't even finish the sentence through her tears. That's when the officer explained about the witness statements. My mother, my own mother, Emma's grandmother who'd been at the birthday party, who'd watched Emma's face light up when she unwrapped that perfume, had given a statement to police. She told them she saw Emma slip the perfume into her bag when no one was looking. She described Emma's clothing from that day, mentioned the time they were supposedly at the store together, provided details that only someone who was actually there could know. Except Emma had never been to Nordstrom that day. She'd been at school until 3:15, then home for her party by 4 o'clock. I had the photos to prove it, the timestamps on social media posts, the attendance records from school. My mother had lied to the police. Deliberately, specifically, with enough detail to make it convincing. She'd lied to frame her own granddaughter. The betrayal hit me so hard I actually felt dizzy, like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. This wasn't just about the perfume anymore. This was about family, about trust, about two women I'd loved and defended my entire life deciding my daughter was acceptable collateral damage for whatever game they were playing. Emma was released without charges for now. The evidence didn't add up, and her alibi was solid. But the damage was done. She cried the entire way home, her face blotchy and swollen, asking me questions I couldn't answer. Why would Grandma lie about her? Why would anyone want to hurt her like this? What had she done wrong? I didn't have answers. I just held her in our driveway until her sobs quieted, feeling her body shake against mine, and made a promise to myself right there on the spot. They wanted to play games with my daughter's life? Fine. But they'd picked the wrong mother to mess with. I spent that entire night planning. See, here's the thing about my family that you need to understand. We've all been enabling Diane for years. Making excuses, covering her debts, pretending her problems aren't that serious because it's easier than dealing with the truth. My mom especially, she's been Diane's safety net since high school, always ready with bail money or couch space or elaborate stories to explain away Diane's latest disaster. But now they'd crossed a line I didn't even know existed. They'd involved Emma. My bright, innocent, trusting daughter who still believed the world was basically fair and adults could be counted on to do the right thing. They'd dragged her into their toxic web of lies and theft and manipulation, and they'd done it on her birthday. So I decided to give them exactly what they've been asking for all these years: consequences. Real ones. The kind that don't go away when you cry enough or make enough promises to change. I started with Diane's employment history. Did you know it's surprisingly easy to verify someone's work record when you have their social security number? And I had Diane's. We'd shared information years ago when she briefly worked for my small accounting practice, back when I still believed she could change, back when I thought tough love just meant being stern about deadlines. Turns out Diane had been lying about more than just the perfume. That job she claimed to have at the marketing firm downtown? I called them. Never heard of her. The apartment she was supposedly renting in the trendy part of the city? The landlord had never seen her application. The car payments she'd been making responsibly for 6 months? 3 months behind, with a repossession notice filed just last week. Every single story she told us about getting her life together was complete fiction. But the real gem was the credit report. I ran a check on my mother's credit, with her social security number, which I had from years of helping her with tax prep, and nearly threw up when I saw the results. Diane had been using my mother's identity to open accounts. Credit cards, store financing, even a small personal loan. All in my mother's name, all with Diane's spending patterns, all leading back to a web of financial fraud that had been going on for at least 18 months. My mother, who'd been struggling to understand why her credit score had dropped 40 points in the last year. My mother, who kept getting bills for things she'd never purchased, who'd been turned down for a mortgage refinancing that should have been automatic. My mother, who'd been losing sleep and taking on extra shifts at her job to cover mysterious expenses that kept appearing on her statements. She'd been a victim too. And she didn't even know it. I printed everything. Bank statements, credit reports, employment verification requests that had come back no record found. Then I made copies and organized them into neat little folders, the way I do for my accounting clients when their finances are a disaster that needs professional attention. But I didn't stop there. Remember how I mentioned Diane had been dating around? Well, it turns out she'd been more than just casually seeing people. She'd been running the same scams on multiple men, telling each of them she was falling in love, that she just needed a little help getting back on her feet, that she'd pay them back as soon as her next job started or her settlement check came through. I found 4 different guys on her social media who'd posted about lending money to girlfriends who suddenly became unavailable when repayment time came around. The amounts weren't huge, $200 here, $500 there, but they added up to serious money. And the pattern was clear as day once you knew what to look for. Then there was the shoplifting history. Because if you think the Miss Dior was Diane's first theft, you're more innocent than I was 3 days ago. A little digging through online court records showed 3 previous incidents over the past year. All dismissed or pleaded down to minor infractions, all involving cosmetics or jewelry, all with my mother mysteriously appearing as a character witness to vouch for Diane's temporary struggles and basically good heart. My mother had been covering for Diane's crimes. Repeatedly. Systematically. She'd been going to court, putting her own reputation on the line, helping my sister escape consequences for theft after theft after theft. And she'd gotten so comfortable with the lies, so practiced at the deception, that she'd been willing to throw Emma under the bus to keep the pattern going. By the second day, I had enough evidence to destroy both their lives completely. Financial fraud, identity theft, a pattern of retail theft, multiple counts of filing false police reports. I could have sent them both to prison for years. But I wanted to give them a chance to do the right thing first. Call it family loyalty, call it stupidity, call it whatever you want. I still believed, somewhere deep down, that they might choose to protect Emma if I just made the stakes clear enough. I called my mother first. "We need to talk about Emma's arrest," I said, keeping my voice steady and professional. The same tone I use with clients when I'm about to deliver bad news about their tax situation. "Oh, honey, I'm sure it will all work out. These things usually do." Her voice was bright, artificially cheerful, like she was discussing a minor scheduling conflict instead of her granddaughter being accused of a crime. "You gave a false statement to the police." Silence. Long, heavy silence that stretched until I could hear her breathing change, becoming shallow and rapid. "I don't know what you mean." "You told them you saw Emma steal that perfume. But Emma was never at Nordstrom that day. She was at school, then at home for her party. You know that." "I know that. And the police are going to figure it out eventually when they really dig into the timeline." More silence. I could practically hear her brain working, trying to figure out how much I knew, how much trouble she was in. Diane needed help. 4 words that explained everything and nothing. 4 words that summed up decades of enabling and excuse-making and looking the other way while my sister destroyed everything she touched. "So you decided to frame your granddaughter? It wasn't supposed to happen like that." Her voice cracked, and for a moment she sounded like the mother I remembered from childhood, uncertain, frightened, human. Diane said the security footage was blurry, that they just needed someone to muddy the waters a little. She said Emma wouldn't get in real trouble because she's a minor, and the charges would probably be dropped anyway. The casual evil of it took my breath away. They'd calculated the cost of traumatizing Emma and decided it was acceptable. A reasonable price to pay for keeping Diane out of jail for a few more months. "You need to call the police and retract your statement." "I can't do that. They'll arrest Diane." Diane committed a crime. Multiple crimes, actually. Emma didn't. "She's my daughter." "Emma is your granddaughter." Another long pause. When my mother spoke again, her voice had hardened into that stubborn tone I remembered from childhood arguments about bedtimes and allowances and why I couldn't have the expensive sneakers all my friends were wearing. "I'm not changing my statement. Diane has been through enough." That's when I knew talking wouldn't work. That's when I realized they'd made their choice, and they were willing to sacrifice Emma to protect themselves. So I moved to phase 2. I called Diane directly. "Hey, sis. We need to chat about Emma's little legal situation." Diane's voice was bright, artificially cheerful, with an edge of something that might have been panic if she wasn't working so hard to hide it. "Oh, that mess? I'm sure it'll blow over. These things always do when you have a good lawyer." "You stole that perfume." "I have no idea what you're talking about." The denial came so quickly, so automatically, that I knew she'd been practicing it. "You stole it from Nordstrom 3 days ago, gave it to Emma as a birthday present, then let her get arrested for your crime. You sat there and watched our mother lie to the police to frame a 15-year-old girl." A laugh. She was actually laughing, like I told her some amusing story about a mix-up at the grocery store. "You're being dramatic. Emma's fine. She's not even charged with anything. She cried for 3 hours yesterday. She asked me if she was going to jail. She asked me why her grandmother would lie about her. Kids are resilient. She'll get over it. Still that casual tone, like Emma's trauma was just a minor inconvenience that would resolve itself with time. That laugh. That casual, dismissive laugh about my daughter's pain. That complete lack of remorse or understanding about what she'd put an innocent child through. You have 24 hours to confess to the police and clear Emma's name. If you don't, I'm going to make your life very, very complicated. Are you threatening me? Now there was steel in her voice, the same tone she'd used as a teenager when anyone dared suggest she might be responsible for her own problems. I'm giving you an opportunity to do the right thing before I do it for you. She hung up on me. 24 hours later, I began phase 3. I started with the police at 9 a.m. sharp. Called Detective Martinez, who was handling Emma's case, and requested a meeting to provide additional evidence. I brought my neat little folders full of documentation, my timeline proving Emma's innocence, and a comprehensive overview of Diane's pattern of theft and fraud. Detective Martinez was a tired-looking woman in her 40s who'd probably seen every variation of family drama the city had to offer. She listened patiently while I laid out the case, occasionally asking questions about dates and documentation. So you're saying your sister framed your daughter to cover up her own theft? I'm saying the evidence suggests that, yes. And I have documentation proving my daughter couldn't have been at Nordstrom when the theft occurred. She reviewed Emma's school records, the photos from her birthday party, the timestamped social media posts from friends who'd been there. Then she looked at Diane's history, the pattern of previous thefts, the financial records showing she couldn't afford the perfume legitimately. This is comprehensive, she said, flipping through the folders. We'll need to interview your sister and mother again. With this new information. Of course. I'm sure they'll be very cooperative. At noon, I called the credit bureaus to report identity theft on my mother's behalf. Filed fraud alerts, disputed the unauthorized accounts, started the process of freezing her credit until the situation could be resolved. The customer service representatives were surprisingly helpful once I explained that there were criminal charges pending. At 1 p.m., I contacted the 4 men Diane had scammed. Turns out they'd been looking for her for months, comparing notes on social media about the woman who'd taken their money and disappeared. I provided them with her current address, my mother's house, and suggested they might want to pursue legal action for fraud. I may have also mentioned that she was about to be very publicly arrested, so if they wanted to recover their money, now might be a good time to file small claims court cases. At 2 p.m., I called Diane's parole officer. Oh, did I forget to mention Diane was on parole? From a conviction 2 years ago for check fraud that my mother had helped her plea down to community service? The parole she'd been violating by committing new thefts, lying about her employment status, and failing to report her address changes when she moved between boyfriends' apartments? The parole officer was very, very interested in the evidence I'd collected. At 3 p.m., I posted a detailed but carefully anonymous story on social media. Not naming names, just a general account of family betrayal, elder fraud, and the importance of protecting children from adult criminals. But I tagged it in a way that anyone who knew our family would understand exactly what was happening. The responses started immediately. Friends who'd lent Diane money and never been paid back. Neighbors who'd suspected she was stealing packages from porches. Former coworkers who'd had things go missing when she was around. A picture emerged of someone who'd been running small-scale scams and thefts for years while the family looked the other way. At 4 p.m., I called the district attorney's office to discuss pressing additional charges related to the conspiracy to frame Emma. Turns out they take cases involving false accusations against minors very seriously. By 5 p.m., my phone was ringing constantly. Diane, screaming and crying and demanding I fix this mess like I was somehow responsible for the consequences of her own actions. My mother, begging me to think about the family as if I hadn't been thinking about family when I watched my daughter sob in a police station. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I took Emma out for ice cream. We sat in the parking lot of her favorite place, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and orange, talking about her plans for sophomore year and whether she wanted to try out for the drama club. "Mom?" she said, licking chocolate chip cookie dough off her spoon with the careful precision of someone trying to make a good thing last as long as possible. "Yeah, baby? Are Aunt Diane and Grandma going to be okay?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. The trust in her eyes was coming back, slowly. The fear that had been haunting her since the arrest was starting to fade. She was beginning to believe again that the world made sense, that good people were protected and bad people faced consequences. "I honestly don't know, Emma. But that's not your responsibility to worry about. Are you okay?" Such a simple question. Such a complex answer. "Yeah. I'm okay. Better than okay, actually." And I was. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be, doing exactly what needed to be done. The arrests happened the next morning at dawn. Diane was picked up at 7 a.m. on multiple charges: theft, fraud, identity theft, parole violation, conspiracy to file a false police report. The works. My mother was arrested an hour later for filing a false police report, conspiracy to commit fraud, and accessory after the fact. I didn't watch. Didn't need to. I was busy making Emma breakfast and helping her pick out an outfit for her first day back at school since the incident. We'd agreed she could take Thursday and Friday off to process everything, but Monday was time to get back to normal life. "You seem different, Mom," Emma said, studying my face while I scrambled her eggs the way she likes them, fluffy with just a tiny bit of cheese. "Different how?" "I don't know. Calmer, maybe. Like you're not worried about something anymore." Smart kid. She was absolutely right. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about Diane's next crisis or my mother's enabling with the slow poison of family dysfunction that had been eating away at our lives like acid. I cut it out. All of it. In 3 precise, surgical days. The aftermath has been intense. Diane's currently in county jail awaiting trial. The evidence against her is overwhelming, not just the perfume theft, but the whole pattern of fraud and theft going back months. Her court-appointed lawyer has mentioned plea bargains, but the prosecutors aren't feeling generous given her record and the fact that she tried to frame a child. My mother made bail, but she's facing serious charges. The false police report alone carries potential jail time, and the financial fraud investigation is expanding as more victims come forward. Her house, the one Diane had been using as a home base for her criminal activities, is being searched as potential evidence storage for stolen goods. The men Diane scammed are pursuing civil cases. Her parole has been revoked pending the new charges. The credit bureaus are treating my mother's identity theft case as a priority due to the criminal charges involved. The local news picked up the story. Aunt and grandmother arrested for framing teen and birthday gift scam ran on the evening broadcast, complete with mugshots and a brief interview with Detective Martinez about the importance of thorough investigations. But that was just the beginning of the media attention. Once the story broke, other victims started coming forward. It turned out Diane's shoplifting wasn't limited to high-end department stores. She'd been hitting pharmacies, grocery stores, discount retailers, anywhere she could grab something small and valuable. The pattern went back 3 years, not one. And in several cases, when store security had gotten suspicious, my mother had appeared as a witness who could vouch for Diane's character or provide alternative explanations for suspicious behavior. They'd been running a 2-person crime syndicate, with my mother as the respectable front person and Diane as the actual thief. The elderly grandmother who'd never heard a fly, testifying that surely there must be some mistake, that her daughter would never steal anything. Meanwhile, Diane walked away with hundreds of dollars worth of merchandise every month. The prosecutor's office started calling it a multi-generational criminal enterprise. That phrase appeared in every news report, every court document, every conversation about the case. My family had become a cautionary tale about how far people will go to enable their loved ones' destructive behavior. Emma handled the media attention better than I expected. When reporters called asking for her perspective as the innocent victim, she declined interviews but released a simple statement through the school counselor: "I hope other kids know they can trust their parents to protect them, even from family members who try to hurt them." 18 words that somehow captured everything I'd been trying to teach her through this whole nightmare. The financial investigation expanded too. It turned out my mother's identity theft situation was worse than I'd initially discovered. Diane hadn't just opened a few credit cards, she'd been systematically draining my mother's retirement account through a series of emergency loans that my mother didn't remember authorizing. Forged signatures, fake documentation, the works. My mother had been planning to retire next year. Now she's looking at working until she's 70 just to recover what Diane stole from her. The cruel irony? She'd been covering for the person who was actively destroying her future. When I found those retirement account statements, I actually felt sorry for her for about 5 minutes. Here was a woman who'd spent decades working double shifts as a nurse, saving every penny for a modest retirement, only to have her own daughter systematically rob her blind. Then I remembered Emma crying in that police station, and my sympathy evaporated, because my mother knew. Maybe not the full extent of the financial fraud, but she knew Diane was stealing. She knew those gifts and great deals were too good to be true. She knew her daughter was a criminal, and instead of getting her help or setting boundaries, she'd chosen to become an accomplice. The trial preparations revealed even more disturbing details. Diane had been taking photos inside stores before stealing, mapping out blind spots in security camera coverage, identifying the most expensive items that would be easiest to conceal. She had notebooks full of information about different stores' loss prevention policies, employee schedules, optimal theft times. This wasn't impulsive shoplifting by someone with a problem. This was premeditated, professional-level retail theft. And when she got caught with Emma's perfume, she'd immediately activated a plan she and my mother had clearly rehearsed: frame an innocent person and let Grandma provide the credible witness testimony. The fact that they'd chosen Emma, a child, their own family member, just proved how completely their moral compass had been destroyed by years of enabling and lies. I started going to therapy around this time. Not because I felt guilty about what I'd done, but because I needed help processing the magnitude of betrayal I was uncovering. Every week brought new revelations about the depths of their deception, and I was struggling to reconcile these monsters with the women I'd loved for 37 years. Dr. Sarah Chen was a family trauma specialist who'd dealt with cases like mine before. She helped me understand that the people I'd grieved for, my loving mother, my irresponsible but ultimately harmless sister, had never really existed. They'd been careful constructions, masks designed to hide the reality of who they actually were. The hardest part, Dr. Chen told me during one session, is accepting that you can love someone and still hold them accountable for harming your child. Love doesn't require you to enable abuse. That became my mantra during the darkest moments, when relatives called screaming about family loyalty and community members whispered about my cruel treatment of my own mother. Love doesn't require you to enable abuse. The preliminary hearings were brutal. Sitting in that courtroom, watching my mother and sister in orange jumpsuits, listening to prosecutors detail their crimes in clinical legal language, it felt surreal. Like watching strangers who happened to look like my family members. Diane's lawyer tried to argue that she had a shopping addiction, that she needed treatment rather than prison. The prosecutor responded by presenting evidence of the detailed theft planning, the systematic fraud, the deliberate framing of a child. "This isn't addiction," he said. "This is organized crime." My mother's lawyer went with a misguided maternal love defense. She was just trying to protect her daughter. She never meant for Emma to get hurt. It was all a terrible misunderstanding that got out of hand. The prosecutor destroyed that argument by playing the recording of my mother's original police statement. Her voice, calm and certain, describing in detail how she'd witnessed Emma stealing the perfume. No hesitation, no uncertainty, no signs of someone who was confused or acting under pressure. Just a grandmother lying with practiced ease to frame her own granddaughter. Emma testified via video link to avoid the trauma of facing them in court. She was poised, articulate, heartbreaking. She described her 15th birthday, her joy at receiving the perfume, her confusion and terror when police arrived at her school. When the prosecutor asked how the false accusations had affected her, Emma's answer was devastating in its simplicity: "I stopped trusting adults. I thought if my own grandmother could lie about me, then maybe nobody was safe." I had to leave the courtroom when she said that. Stood in the hallway crying angry tears while strangers who'd come to watch the proceedings stared at me with a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. But the most powerful moment came when Emma was asked if she wanted to say anything directly to her grandmother and aunt. "I forgive you," she said, looking straight into the camera. "But forgiveness doesn't mean what you did was okay. It doesn't mean there shouldn't be consequences. I forgive you so I can move on with my life, but I never want to see either of you again." 15 years old, and she understood justice better than most adults. The plea negotiations revealed the full extent of the damage. Diane was looking at 5 to 7 years in prison on the theft and fraud charges alone. The conspiracy to frame Emma added another 3 to 5 years. My mother was facing 2 to 4 years for her role, plus massive financial penalties to repay the victims of the fraud scheme. Their lawyers advised them to take plea deals rather than risk trial, where sentences could be even harsher. But Diane refused to allocate, to formally admit guilt and accept responsibility. She maintained that everything was just a series of misunderstandings, that she was being persecuted for minor mistakes. My mother wavered. Her lawyer clearly wanted her to take the deal, to show remorse, to at least try to minimize the damage to her remaining family relationships. But every time she seemed ready to accept responsibility, Diane would call from jail with tears and manipulation, convincing her to stay strong and fight the lies. Even facing prison, they couldn't break the toxic cycle. The extended family drama was almost as exhausting as the legal proceedings. My father's siblings, people I barely spoke to under normal circumstances, suddenly had strong opinions about my choices. Uncle Richard, who hadn't called me in 5 years, left voicemails about how I was destroying the family over a simple misunderstanding. Cousin Martha, who'd never shown any interest in Emma before, posted on social media about how children should be taught to forgive and forget rather than hold grudges. The audacity was breathtaking. These people, who'd never lifted a finger to help when Diane was spiraling or when my mother was struggling with mysterious financial problems, now wanted to lecture me about family values. I started documenting their responses too. Not for legal purposes, but for Emma's sake. I wanted her to have a record of who in our extended family was willing to excuse the abuse of a child for the sake of maintaining toxic family dynamics. She'd need to know who was safe and who wasn't as she got older. Emma's school counselor, Mrs. Rodriguez, became an unexpected ally during this period. She dealt with family trauma cases before and helped Emma process not just the direct betrayal, but the secondary trauma of having extended family members minimize her experience. It's normal for people to want to believe that families are always loving and protective, Mrs. Rodriguez explained to Emma. When they see evidence that contradicts that belief, they often blame the victim rather than accepting the reality of family abuse. She was right. It was easier for people to believe that I was overreacting than to accept that a grandmother and aunt could deliberately traumatize a child. It was more comfortable to frame me as vindictive than to acknowledge that sometimes family members are genuinely dangerous. The financial restitution process became another full-time job. Diane's victims, the stores, the individuals she'd scammed, the credit companies dealing with the identity theft, all needed documentation, testimony, evidence compilation. I spent hours on the phone with lawyers, insurance investigators, and law enforcement from multiple jurisdictions. But the most time-consuming part was helping my mother understand the extent of what had been done to her. She was still living in denial about Diane's theft from her retirement accounts, still making excuses about how Diane had probably meant to pay it back eventually. The financial advisor who reviewed her accounts was blunt. "Ma'am, your daughter stole approximately $47,000 from you over 18 months. This wasn't borrowing. This was systematic theft designed to leave you with nothing." Even facing those numbers, printed in black and white, my mother's first response was to ask if there was some way to avoid pressing charges against Diane for that particular crime. The depth of the enablement was pathological. I finally understood why Emma had been so easy to frame. In a family where stealing $47,000 from your elderly mother could be rationalized as a mistake, framing a 15-year-old for shoplifting probably seemed like a minor inconvenience. The sentencing hearings were scheduled for 6 months after the arrests. By then, the full scope of the criminal enterprise had been documented, cataloged, and presented to the court. 17 separate criminal charges between the two of them. Dozens of victims. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in theft and fraud. In short, both their lives are completely destroyed. Careers over, reputations ruined, facing years in prison. The kind of consequences that don't go away with apologies or promises to change. And my phone won't stop ringing. My mother's friends calling to tell me I'm a monster for turning in family. Distant relatives who barely speak to us normally suddenly very concerned about family loyalty and forgiveness. Even some of Emma's friends' parents, gently suggesting that maybe I went too far, that family problems should be handled privately. To which I say, they framed my 15-year-old daughter for a crime she didn't commit. On her birthday. They were willing to let her have a criminal record, to traumatize her, to teach her that the adults in her life couldn't be trusted, all to cover up my sister's theft. You think I went too far? I think I showed remarkable restraint, because here's what I could have done differently. I could have sat Emma down and explained that sometimes families protect their own, even when their own don't deserve it. I could have taught her that being loyal means swallowing injustice and pretending everything is fine. I could have modeled the same toxic patterns that have been poisoning our family for decades. Instead, I taught her that actions have consequences. That people who hurt children don't get free passes just because you share DNA. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's destructive behavior, even when they're family. Especially when they're family. The sentencing day arrived on a cold Tuesday morning in November. Emma asked if she could attend, and after consulting with Dr. Chen and Mrs. Rodriguez, we decided it might provide closure for her to see the process through to the end. The courtroom was packed. Local news crews, victims of their various frauds, family members from both sides, and curious community members who'd been following the case in the papers. Emma sat between me and Mrs. Rodriguez, calm and composed in a way that made me incredibly proud. Judge Patricia Williams had a reputation for being tough but fair. She'd reviewed all the evidence, all the victim impact statements, all the psychological evaluations and character references. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen too many cases like this one. This court has rarely seen such a systematic pattern of deception, manipulation, and abuse of trust, she began. What makes this case particularly disturbing is the defendant's willingness to victimize not only strangers and romantic partners, but their own family members, including a minor child. She sentenced Diane first. 7 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. Restitution to all victims totaling $89,000. Permanent prohibition from having contact with Emma or entering any retail establishment without supervision. Diane collapsed when she heard the sentence. Not crying, actually collapsed, like her legs just gave out. Her lawyer caught her, helped her back to her chair, while she gasped for air and made these awful keening sounds. It was the first time in 6 months that I saw her react to consequences like they were real. My mother's sentence was more lenient but still devastating: 4 years in prison, 3 years supervised probation, $47,000 in restitution just for the identity theft alone. and a no-contact order regarding Emma that would remain in effect until Emma turned 25 and could make her own decisions about the relationship. When Judge Williams read that part, my mother turned to look at Emma for the first time since the hearings began. The expression on her face was pure desperation, like she was finally understanding that her choices had cost her not just her freedom, but her granddaughter. Emma met her gaze steadily, then turned away without a word. After the sentencing, we had to navigate a gauntlet of reporters and family members outside the courthouse. Emma handled the attention with remarkable maturity, simply saying "I'm glad it's over" when asked for comment. But Uncle Richard was waiting by our car, red-faced and furious. "Are you happy now?" he shouted at me across the parking lot. "Your own mother is going to prison because you couldn't let sleeping dogs lie." Emma stepped slightly in front of me, this fierce, protective gesture from my 15-year-old daughter that made my heart break and swell at the same time. "My grandmother lied to police to frame me for a crime I didn't commit," Emma said, her voice carrying clearly across the parking lot. "That's why she's going to prison. Not because my mom reported it." Uncle Richard's face got even redder. "She was protecting family." "She was protecting a thief by destroying an innocent person," Emma replied. "That's not love. That's abuse." And then my 15-year-old daughter turned around, got in our car, and left our toxic extended family standing in a courthouse parking lot with no response to her simple truth. The months that followed were about rebuilding. Emma threw herself into school with renewed focus, making honor roll every semester and joining the debate team. She said the experience had taught her the importance of being able to argue with facts and evidence rather than just emotions. I continued therapy, working through the complex grief of losing family members who were still alive, still in the world, but permanently cut off from our lives. Dr. Chen helped me understand that this was a form of death, the death of relationships that had been built on lies and manipulation rather than genuine love and respect. We developed new traditions to replace the old ones. Instead of big family gatherings where we walked on eggshells around Diane's chaos and my mother's enabling, Emma and I started hosting game nights for her friends and their families. Our house became a place where kids felt safe, where parents could trust that adults would act like responsible adults. Emma's recovery was remarkable to watch. The nightmares stopped. The flinching at police sirens faded. She started talking about her future with excitement again, college plans, career goals, dreams that extended beyond just surviving the present moment. But the most significant change was in how she talked about boundaries and relationships. She became incredibly good at identifying manipulative behavior in others, at recognizing when people were trying to make her responsible for their emotions or problems. When her best friend Sarah started dating a boy who isolated her from other friends, Emma was the one who gently pointed out the pattern and helped Sarah recognize the red flags. When a teacher tried to pressure Emma into taking on extra responsibilities by saying she was letting everyone down, Emma politely declined and suggested the teacher find a more equitable solution. She'd learned, in the most painful way possible, that loving someone doesn't mean accepting their abuse. And she was determined to never let anyone, family or otherwise, manipulate her into betraying her own well-being. About 18 months after the sentencing, I got a letter from my mother in prison. 27 pages of handwriting, alternating between self-pity and what might have been genuine remorse. She wrote about finally understanding the depth of damage she'd enabled, about going to therapy in prison, about wanting to make amends. The letter ended with a simple request: would I please tell Emma that her grandmother loved her and was sorry for everything that had happened? I showed the letter to Emma, who read it carefully and thoughtfully. "What do you think?" I asked. "I think she's sorry she got caught and lost her comfortable life," Emma said. "I think she's sorry about the consequences she's facing. But I don't think she really understands what she did to me, because if she did, she wouldn't be asking you to fix it for her." My brilliant daughter had seen right through to the heart of the manipulation. Even from prison, my mother was trying to use me as an intermediary rather than taking full responsibility for her choices. "So what do you want me to do with the letter?" "Keep it," Emma said. "Maybe someday I'll want to read it again. But I'm not ready to respond, and I don't want her to think that writing a long letter erases what she did." I filed the letter away with all the other documentation from the case. Evidence of a family that had been built on lies, and of the painful process of building something healthier in its place. The media attention eventually died down, but the impact lingered in our community. Emma became something of a local symbol of resilience, the girl who'd survived family betrayal and emerged stronger. She was invited to speak at a few community events about teen mental health and family abuse, always with the message that kids deserve to be protected, even from their own relatives. Now, 3 years later, as I finish writing this story at 2 a.m., I can see the full scope of what we survived and what we built afterward. Emma is a senior now, preparing for college with plans to study social work and law. She wants to help other kids who get caught in family dysfunction, to be the kind of adult who believes children and protects them from harm. Diane was released on parole 6 months ago but violated the terms within 3 weeks by attempting to contact Emma through social media. She's back in prison now, probably for another 2 years. My mother is scheduled for release next year, but the no-contact order regarding Emma remains in effect. Neither of them has shown any real understanding of the harm they caused. Their letters and communications continue to focus on their own suffering, their own losses, their own victimization by an unfair legal system. They still don't understand that they created their own consequences by choosing to abuse a child. My mother has been calling every day since her arrest. Long, tearful voicemails where she cries and begs and promises things will be different if I just help her fix this misunderstanding. She wants me to talk to the prosecutors, to downplay the evidence, to help her spin a story about temporary confusion and family miscommunication. Diane writes letters from jail. Long, rambling things that alternate between self-pity and rage, written on cheap notebook paper in her looping handwriting. She's convinced this is all a massive overreaction to a simple mistake. She can't seem to understand that framing a child for theft isn't a mistake, it's a deliberate choice to prioritize your own convenience over an innocent person's welfare. I haven't responded to either of them. Haven't visited, haven't accepted their collect calls, haven't acknowledged their existence except to provide additional evidence to prosecutors when requested. Because here's the thing they still don't get, even now, this was never about the perfume. This was about Emma coming home from school in tears, asking me why the police thought she was a criminal. This was about watching my daughter's trust in the world crumble in a fluorescent-lit interrogation room while adults who were supposed to love her fed her to the wolves. This was about 2 women deciding that a child's trauma was an acceptable price to pay for their own comfort. You don't get to hurt my kid and then ask me to help you escape the consequences. You definitely don't get to do it and expect me to pretend it never happened. So when people ask if I feel guilty about destroying my sister's life, about watching my mother face jail time, about tearing our family apart over just a bottle of perfume, I tell them the truth. I sleep better now than I have in years. Because Emma is safe. She's protected. And she knows, without any doubt, that her mother will always choose her over anyone who tries to hurt her. Even family. Especially family. 3 days. That's all it took to dismantle decades of dysfunction and manipulation. 3 days to show Emma that love doesn't mean accepting abuse, that family doesn't mean enabling crime, that sometimes the most radical act of protection is simply telling the truth and letting the consequences fall where they may. My sister hasn't stopped crying since her arrest? Good. Maybe tears are what it takes to understand the weight of what she did to an innocent child. My mother is begging me to stop the legal process? Too late. She made her choice when she decided to lie to police to protect a thief instead of her granddaughter. As for me? I'm done being the family peacekeeper. Done pretending that love means tolerating toxicity. Done teaching my daughter that women should accept mistreatment for the sake of keeping everyone else comfortable. Emma deserved better. She got it. And if that makes me the villain in this family story, I'll wear that badge with pride. Because sometimes, the real monster isn't the person who destroys a corrupt system. Sometimes, the real monster is the person who lets it continue.
Story 5.
My father tossed a duffel bag with my clothes onto the front lawn and shouted, "Get out of my house, you ungrateful rat." When I had reported my sister for stealing thousands from his workplace. My mother sided with him, screaming, "Family protects their own, you should have kept your mouth shut." My sister smirked and added, "Hope that $24 in your account lasts a long time, snitch." I just stayed quiet and left without arguing. That was 8 years ago. Yesterday, they showed up unannounced at my front door, suddenly full of family love after discovering that I purchased an $800,000 home. You want to know what the truly twisted part is? I saw them coming from my kitchen window, the same beaten-down Honda Civic that Dad refused to replace because cars are just transportation, not status symbols. The irony wasn't lost on me as I watched him park it in my circular driveway, next to my Tesla Model S, the one I bought in cash just because I could. The doorbell chimed that expensive, custom melody I programmed, Vivaldi Spring, because I have a sense of humor about new beginnings. When I opened the door, there they were, Dad with his forced smile that never reached his eyes, Mom clutching a store-bought apple pie like some peace offering, and Rebecca, my sister, standing slightly behind them with that same calculating look I remembered from childhood. She was wearing makeup to cover the stress lines, but I could see them anyway. Time hadn't been kind. Surprise. Mom's voice cracked with false cheer. We wanted to see our successful daughter. Our successful daughter. 8 years of radio silence, and now I was theirs again. "How did you get my address?" I asked, not moving from the doorway. The security system was recording everything. I'd made sure of that after what happened last time someone from my past tried to surprise me. Dad's smile faltered for just a second. "We have our ways. Can we come in? It's cold out here. It was 75 degrees in early September. Classic dad manipulation: create urgency where none exists, make the other person feel unreasonable for not immediately complying. But here's the thing about being disowned and left with nothing: you either break completely, or you develop a spine made of titanium. Guess which one happened to me? I stepped aside and let them in, watching their faces as they took in the marble foyer, the crystal chandelier I'd had imported from Italy, the original Monet sketch I'd spent 6 months tracking down at auction. Rebecca's eyes went wide, calculating, hungry. She was doing math in her head. I could practically see the dollar signs reflecting in her pupils. This is... Wow, Mom breathed, setting down the pie on my Italian marble side table like she was afraid it might contaminate something. Her hands were shaking slightly. How did you afford all this? There it was. Not "we're proud of you" or "we missed you" or even "congratulations on your success." Just the immediate assumption that I couldn't possibly have earned this myself. Some things never change. I worked for it, I said simply, leading them through the foyer past the oil painting I commissioned of the city skyline, the view from my old apartment window when I was 22 and eating ramen 3 meals a day. We moved to the living room, and I watched them settle onto my custom leather sectional, the one that cost more than most people's annual salary. Dad kept looking around like he was cataloging everything, probably calculating the worth of every piece, every fixture. Old habits die hard, I suppose. So, Rebecca said, her voice syrupy sweet, "What kind of work are you doing now? Last we heard, you were working at that little nonprofit downtown." Last we heard. Like they'd been keeping casual tabs on me instead of pretending I didn't exist for nearly a decade. "I started a consulting firm," I said, settling into the chair across from them, the perfect distance to watch their faces. "We specialize in fraud detection and prevention for mid to large corporations." The color drained from Rebecca's face so fast I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "That's interesting," Dad said slowly, his voice careful now. "Fraud detection. Yeah, it's amazing how much money companies lose to internal theft every year. Billions, actually. You'd be shocked at how creative employees can get when they think nobody's watching." I kept my voice conversational, but I saw Rebecca shift uncomfortably, crossing and uncrossing her legs. My first big case actually came from an anonymous tip about someone skimming from payroll. Turned into a $120,000 recovery for the client. Made my reputation overnight. Mom laughed nervously, that high-pitched sound she made when she was uncomfortable. "Well, that's certainly justice, I suppose." Justice. I rolled the word around on my tongue like expensive wine. Funny thing about justice, it has this way of coming full circle, doesn't it? Sometimes it takes years, but it always finds a way. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of my high-end air purification system and the distant sound of my automated sprinkler system cycling through the garden outside. I watched my family, and yeah, I use that term very loosely now, try to figure out how to navigate this conversation. Rebecca cleared her throat, a forced sound. "Listen, Sarah, we know things ended badly 8 years ago. We were hurt, and we said things we didn't mean. People say terrible things when they're emotional. You called me a snitch. That was, you said you hoped my $24 lasted a long time. You laughed about it. I was angry, and you, Dad," I turned to him, studying his face. He looked older, worn down. The stress of keeping Rebecca's secrets had aged him. "You called me an ungrateful rat and threw my belongings onto the lawn like I was garbage. My laptop got ruined in the sprinklers. Lost 4 years of college work." His face went red, that familiar flush I remembered from childhood when he was about to explode. "Now, hold on. You destroyed this family. I reported a crime." "You reported your sister." The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Even 8 years later, he couldn't see it. Couldn't understand that stealing is stealing, regardless of who does it or what chromosome they happen to share with you. Mom jumped in, her voice shaky and desperate. "We're here because we love you, sweetheart. We want to rebuild our relationship. We've missed you so much." I almost laughed out loud. The timing was just too perfect, too convenient. And when exactly did this sudden burst of maternal love occur? Was it before or after you found out about the house? "That's not," Mom started. "Let me guess," I interrupted, standing up and walking to the window. "Rebecca's having money troubles again. Big ones this time." The look that passed between my parents was all the confirmation I needed. Quick, panicked, guilty. Rebecca's jaw tightened, and for a split second, I saw the real her, Not the sweet, apologetic sister act, but the calculating predator I remembered. "That's not why we're here," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Really? Because last I checked, you three were doing just fine without me. Dad's still working at Morrison Industries? Mom's still at First National Bank? Rebecca's still. What was it you were doing last time?" "I'm between jobs right now," Rebecca muttered, staring at her hands. "Between jobs?" I nodded thoughtfully, letting the silence stretch. "How long has it been since the last one?" "That's not really your business." "You're right, it's not. Just like my success isn't your business." I turned back to face them, and the afternoon light streaming through my floor-to-ceiling windows cast long shadows across the room. "You want to know what's really twisted about this whole situation? I spent years, hoping you'd call. Hoping you'd realize that I was just trying to do the right thing." "Sarah," Dad started, but I held up a hand. "No, let me finish. I need to say this, and you need to hear it." I walked back to my chair, but didn't sit. "I used to drive past the house sometimes, just to see if maybe you were ready to talk. Pathetic, right? I sent Christmas cards the first 2 years, did you know that? Beautiful ones, expensive ones. Handwritten notes about how much I missed you all. Return to sender, every single one." Mom made a small sound, maybe regret, maybe just discomfort at being confronted with the reality of what they'd done. "I built this life from nothing. Literally nothing. You want to know what I did that first night after you threw me out?" They didn't answer, but I could see the curiosity in their eyes, warring with their discomfort. "I slept in my car. In a Walmart parking lot on the south side of town. $24 to my name, just like Rebecca so kindly reminded me." I walked to the window again, looking out at my perfectly manicured garden with its imported Japanese maples and hand-selected stone features. The security guard knocked on my window around midnight, told me I couldn't sleep there. So I drove to another parking lot. Then another one. Spent the whole night driving from place to place, trying to find somewhere I could rest for a few hours without getting moved along. The silence in the room was deafening. I could hear Mom's breathing, quick and shallow. It took me 3 weeks to find a room in a boarding house on Maple Street. You know the one, where they rent to people getting out of prison and kids aging out of foster care. $50 a week, shared bathroom down the hall, no kitchen privileges. My first job was cleaning offices at night, minimum wage, no benefits, working from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. so I could go to classes during the day. I turned back to face them. And not once in 8 years, did any of you try to reach out. Not when I graduated college summa cum laude with my business degree. Not when I started my company in a rented office space above the Chinese restaurant downtown. Not when I bought my first apartment, or when I was featured in that business magazine article about young entrepreneurs. Dad's eyebrows shot up. "Business magazine?" "Forbes," I said casually, enjoying the way his eyes widened. 30 under 30 in financial services. 2 years ago. Full 2-page spread, professional photo shoot, the works. But I guess you missed that one. Must not have made it to your usual reading list. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could practically hear the gears turning in their heads, recalculating my worth, adjusting their approach, figuring out new angles. Rebecca was the first to speak, and when she did, her voice had that practiced sincerity that I remembered from when she used to talk her way out of trouble in high school. "We're proud of you, Sarah. We really are. We didn't know how to reach out after so much time had passed. Are you? Proud of me? Or are you just impressed by the dollar signs?" "That's not fair." "Fair?" The word came out sharper than I intended, and I saw Mom flinch. "You want to talk about fair? Let's talk about how you stole $67,432 from Dad's company over the course of 2 years and 3 months. "Alleged," Rebecca started, but I cut her off with a laugh. "Oh, it's not alleged anymore. See, that's the beautiful thing about running a fraud detection firm, you develop connections. People in HR departments, accounting firms, law enforcement agencies. Professional networks are amazing things." I smiled, and it felt sharp as broken glass. "Did you know Morrison Industries hired my company last year?" The blood drained from Dad's face so quickly I thought he might pass out. "What?" "Consulting contract on updated security protocols. Loss prevention strategies. Ways to catch internal theft before it becomes a major problem." I walked over to my bookshelf and pulled out a thick binder. "Funny thing, your name came up during the preliminary research phase, Rebecca. Seems like they never quite closed that case to their satisfaction. Rebecca bolted upright from the couch like she'd been electrocuted. You can't, that was years ago. The statute of limitations. The statute of limitations on felony embezzlement in this state is 5 years from the date of discovery, not the date of the crime. It's been. I pretended to calculate, flipping through the binder, 4 years and 8 months since you were terminated. Still plenty of time left on the clock. Sarah, Dad's voice was barely a whisper. You wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Do my job? Provide complete and accurate information to my clients? I shrugged, closing the binder with a satisfying thud. I'm contracted to give them a comprehensive report on all potential security vulnerabilities. If someone with a documented history of internal theft applied for any position there, wouldn't that be relevant information for their security assessment? Mom was crying now, quiet, desperate tears that she was trying to hide by looking down at her hands. Please, honey. She's learned her lesson. She's changed. She's been trying so hard to get back on her feet. Has she? Because from what I've heard through my professional networks, she's been between jobs quite a bit lately. Getting harder to find work when word gets around about your creative accounting skills. Rebecca's mask finally slipped completely. The sweet, apologetic sister act crumbled like a house of cards, revealing the calculating, entitled person I remembered. Her face twisted with rage. You vindictive witch. This is exactly why we cut you out. You've always been cold, always thought you were better than us, always had to be the perfect little princess. I never thought I was better than you. I thought I was different. Turns out I was right. Dad stood up suddenly, his face purple with rage, the veins in his forehead standing out like road maps. You want to destroy your own family? Fine. But don't pretend this is about justice or doing the right thing. This is revenge, pure and simple. Maybe it is, I said quietly, and the honesty seemed to shock them more than anything else I'd said. Maybe after 8 years of being dead to you, maybe after building everything I have from nothing while you lived comfortably off stolen money, maybe I am looking for a little revenge. So what? The admission hung in the air between us like a challenge. But here's the thing, I continued, walking back to the window. I don't actually need revenge. You know why? Because you three are exactly where you deserve to be, and I'm exactly where I deserve to be. Life has a way of sorting these things out, given enough time. I walked to the front door and opened it, letting in the warm evening air and the sound of my neighbors' children playing in their yard. Normal family sounds. I think it's time for you to leave. Sarah, please, Mom pleaded, still clutching that ridiculous store-bought pie like it was some kind of life preserver. No. You made your choice 8 years ago when you decided that protecting a thief was more important than supporting someone trying to do the right thing. You chose to believe that family loyalty meant covering up crimes instead of helping someone learn from their mistakes. You chose to throw away your daughter rather than face the truth about who Rebecca really is. They filed out slowly, reluctantly, like prisoners being marched to execution. Rebecca was the last to leave, pausing at the threshold to look back at me. This isn't over, she said quietly, and there was something in her voice that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Yes, it is. I met her eyes steadily. Because here's what you don't understand, I don't need you anymore. Any of you. I built a life, a career, a future without you. This house? This success? It's not something you can take away from me because you didn't give it to me in the first place. After I closed the door, I stood in my foyer for a long time, listening to their car pull away. The house felt different somehow, lighter, cleaner. Like I'd finally expelled some poison that had been sitting in my bloodstream for years. I picked up Mom's apple pie from the side table and looked at it for a moment. Store-bought, cheap, probably grabbed from a gas station on the way over. A last-minute afterthought, just like their sudden affection for me. I tossed it in the trash without ceremony. That night, I sat in my home office, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights, and opened my laptop. I had a report to finish for Morrison Industries, and it was going to be very, very thorough. You see, the thing about fraud detection is that it's not just about catching thieves. It's about protecting honest people from predators. It's about making sure that hardworking folks don't get their livelihoods stolen by people who think rules don't apply to them, who believe that charm and family connections can paper over criminal behavior. People like my sister. I typed steadily for 3 hours, documenting everything I knew, everything I could prove, every connection I'd uncovered over the past year of investigation. When I was done, I had a 63-page report that would ensure Rebecca never worked in any position involving money, trust, or responsibility ever again. Was it revenge? Maybe. Was it justice? Definitely. Was it the right thing to do? Well, I'd been asking myself that question for 8 years, ever since I made the hardest decision of my life and chose truth over family loyalty. The answer hadn't changed. I hit send at 2:17 a.m. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from various family members, aunts, uncles, cousins who'd probably heard about yesterday's visit and the subsequent fallout. None from the 3 people who'd raised me and then discarded me like yesterday's newspaper. I didn't call back. Instead, I made coffee in my ridiculously expensive espresso machine, sat on my back deck overlooking the garden I'd hired award-winning landscapers to design, and watched the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. It was going to be a beautiful day. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Rebecca. We need to talk. Call me." I deleted it without responding. Another buzz. "Sarah, please. I know you're angry, but this could ruin everything for me. My whole future." Delete. I'm family. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I stared at that last message for a long time. Family. The word that had been used to manipulate me, control me, and ultimately abandon me when I refused to be complicit in corruption. I typed back, "You're right. Family should mean something. It should mean love, support, and doing what's right even when it's hard. It should mean protecting each other from making terrible mistakes, not enabling them. You taught me what family isn't. Thank you for the lesson." Then I blocked the number. Over the next few weeks, the fallout was spectacular in the way that only small-town scandals can be. Morrison Industries not only terminated their consulting relationship with a firm Rebecca had been trying to freelance for, apparently, my report had flagged several irregularities in their bookkeeping that warranted further investigation. The ripple effect spread through the small network of financial services companies in our city like wildfire. In an industry built entirely on trust and reputation, Rebecca's name became radioactive. I heard through professional channels that Dad had to take early retirement after 32 years with the company. The stress of having his family's dirty laundry aired at his workplace, combined with the whispered questions about what else he might have known or covered up, finally caught up with him. His pension took a hit because he didn't make it to his full retirement age. Mom apparently developed what she called nervous episodes and started seeing a therapist twice a week. The medical bills weren't cheap, especially on a reduced household income. Did I feel guilty? Sometimes. In quiet moments, when I was alone in this big house I'd bought partly to prove something to people who no longer cared, I wondered if I'd gone too far. If there might have been another way to handle things. But then I'd remember that first night in the Walmart parking lot, shivering in my 10-year-old Honda Civic with $24 and nowhere to go. I'd remember the years of silence, the returned Christmas cards, the way they only remembered I existed when they wanted something from me. And I'd remember that 16-year-old version of myself, standing in Dad's office with trembling hands, offering him proof that his precious daughter was stealing from him. That scared, naive girl who thought doing the right thing would make everything okay, who believed that truth and justice would be rewarded. She deserved better than what she got. And maybe, just maybe, protecting future victims from Rebecca's schemes was worth more than preserving a family that was built on lies and manipulation anyway. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd finally become exactly what they'd accused me of being 8 years ago. A snitch. Someone who chose justice over loyalty. Someone who couldn't let sleeping dogs lie, who had to dig up the past and shine a light on uncomfortable truths. The difference was, now I was proud of it. 3 months later, I was featured in another magazine, this time a cover story about ethical business practices and the importance of corporate whistleblowing. The photographer shot me in my home office, surrounded by the success I'd built from nothing but determination and an unshakable moral compass. In the final photo that made the cover, I'm smiling, really smiling, not the forced expression I'd perfected for networking events and client meetings. I look happy. I look free. I look like someone who finally knows exactly who she is and what she stands for. Because for the first time in 26 years, I finally was. But you want to know the truth? Sometimes, late at night when the house creaks and settles around me, when the security system chirps its all-clear signal and the automatic lights cycle through their patterns, I find myself listening for the sound of a car in my driveway. Wondering if they'll come back, if there's some final card they haven't played yet, some desperate last-ditch attempt to claw back what they think they're owed. Rebecca was always resourceful, always one step ahead of consequences. She had a gift for finding people's weaknesses and exploiting them, for turning situations to her advantage even when the odds were stacked against her. And desperate people do desperate things, especially when their backs are against the wall and they have nothing left to lose. I've upgraded my security system twice since that day they showed up at my door. Motion sensors, cameras with night vision, alert systems that connect directly to my phone and to a private security company. Maybe it's paranoia, or maybe it's just good sense born from hard experience. After all, I've learned that the people who can hurt you most are usually the ones who know exactly where you live, exactly what you have to lose, and exactly which buttons to push to make you question everything you thought you knew about right and wrong. And now they know I have something worth taking. The question is, what are they willing to do to get it? I guess we'll find out. The first sign something was wrong came 6 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. I was reviewing quarterly reports in my office when my assistant knocked on the door, something she never did unless it was urgent. "Sarah? There's someone here to see you. Says she's your aunt?" My blood went cold. Aunt Linda, Mom's sister, the one who always played peacekeeper in family disputes. I hadn't seen her since the day they threw me out, when she stood silently in the driveway watching Dad toss my belongings onto the lawn. "Send her in," I said, closing my laptop and straightening my blazer. If they were sending in reinforcements, this was about to get interesting. Linda walked in looking older than her 58 years, her gray hair pulled back in a messy bun, stress lines etched deep around her eyes. She'd been crying, recently, by the look of her makeup. "Hello, Sarah." Her voice was quiet, careful. "Thank you for seeing me." I almost didn't. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "What do you want, Linda?" She sat down heavily, clutching her purse like a shield. "Your sister attempted suicide last night." The words hit me like a physical blow, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. "What? Kills? Your mother found her around midnight. She's at St. Mary's Hospital, stable but..." Linda's voice cracked. "The doctors say she'll recover physically, but mentally." I stared at her, trying to process what she was telling me. Rebecca, manipulative, calculating Rebecca, had tried to kill herself. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because she left a note. And your name was all over it." Something cold settled in my stomach. "What kind of note?" Linda reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "She blamed you. Said you destroyed her life, ruined any chance she had at a future. Said she couldn't live with everyone knowing what she'd done." I took the paper with trembling fingers and unfolded it. Rebecca's handwriting, shaky but legible. "I can't do this anymore. Sarah won't stop until she's destroyed everything I have left. She's turned the whole town against me, made sure I can never work again, never have a normal life. She calls it justice, but it's revenge, and she won't be satisfied until I'm dead. Maybe this is what she wanted all along. Maybe now she'll be happy." The words blurred as I read them. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the paper. "She's wrong," I whispered. "I never wanted. I just wanted her to face consequences for what she did." "Did you?" Linda's voice was sharp now. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you went out of your way to make sure she could never rebuild her life. That report you wrote, it didn't just stop her from getting one job, Sarah. It blacklisted her from an entire industry. She's a thief. She's your sister." The words echoed in the office, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. Linda's face was flushed with anger and grief, and I could see the family resemblance to Mom in the set of her jaw. "She made her choices," I said finally. "I just made sure people knew about them. And now she's lying in a hospital bed with a tube down her throat because she couldn't see any way forward." Linda stood up abruptly. "I came here hoping. I don't know what I was hoping. That you'd show some remorse? Some sign that you still have a heart in there somewhere?" I looked down at the suicide note again, rereading the words that painted me as some kind of vengeful monster. "What do you want me to do, Linda? Pretend she never stole that money? Pretend she never destroyed people's trust? Pretend that actions don't have consequences? I want you to remember that she's human. That she's struggling. That maybe, just maybe, 8 years of punishment is enough." After Linda left, I sat in my office for hours, staring at that note. The words seemed to burn themselves into my retinas. Maybe this is what she wanted all along. Maybe now she'll be happy. Was that what I wanted? Had some part of me hoped it would come to this? The rational part of my brain said no. I'd wanted justice, accountability, consequences for her actions. I'd wanted her to understand that stealing wasn't acceptable, that trust once broken couldn't be easily repaired. I'd wanted her to face the same kind of struggle I'd faced when they threw me out with nothing. But had I wanted her dead? I called my therapist and made an emergency appointment for that afternoon. Dr. Martinez had been helping me work through my family issues for 3 years, ever since I'd finally accepted that the success and money couldn't fill the hole their rejection had left in my life. She was a small woman with kind eyes and an uncomfortable way of asking exactly the right questions. "How do you feel about Rebecca's suicide attempt?" she asked, settling back in her chair. "Guilty," I admitted. "And angry that I feel guilty. And confused about whether I should feel guilty." "Tell me about the anger." I shifted in my seat, trying to find the words. "She's manipulating me. Even unconscious in a hospital bed, she's still manipulating me." That note, it was designed to make me feel exactly like this. Like somehow I'm responsible for her choices. "Are you?" The question hung in the air between us. "I don't know," I whispered. "I wrote that report because it was the truth. Because other companies deserve to know what kind of person they might be hiring. But part of me enjoyed it. Writing it. Sending it. Knowing that she'd finally face real consequences for what she did." I looked up at Dr. Martinez. "Does that make me a terrible person?" "It makes you human. You were hurt deeply by people who were supposed to love and protect you. It's natural to want them to understand that pain. But not at the cost of someone's life." "Is that what you wanted? Her life?" I thought about it seriously, searching my feelings with the brutal honesty Dr. Martinez had taught me. No. I wanted her to struggle like I struggled. I wanted her to understand what it felt like to have nothing, to be rejected by everyone, to have to rebuild from zero. I wanted her to appreciate what she'd thrown away when she chose to steal instead of working honestly. And now? Now I don't know what I want anymore. That evening, I drove to St. Mary's Hospital. I told myself I was just gathering information, making sure she was actually as bad off as Linda claimed. But as I walked through the sterile corridors toward the intensive care unit, I knew I was lying to myself. Rebecca looked small in the hospital bed, smaller than I remembered. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that beeped and hummed with electronic life. Her face was pale, almost gray, and her hair was lank and unwashed. She looked nothing like the smirking, confident woman who'd stood in my foyer 6 weeks ago. Mom was asleep in a chair beside the bed, her head tilted at an uncomfortable angle. She looked exhausted, aged by worry and guilt. Dad was nowhere to be seen. I stood in the doorway for a long time, just watching. Rebecca's chest rose and fell with mechanical precision, assisted by the ventilator. The sound was hypnotic and horrible. A nurse appeared beside me. "Are you family?" "Sister," I said automatically, then caught myself. "Former sister. It's complicated." The nurse nodded like she understood. "She's been stable since yesterday morning. The psychiatrist will evaluate her when she wakes up, determine if she's still a danger to herself." "When will that be?" "Could be hours, could be days. Everyone responds differently to this kind of trauma." I left without waking Mom, without leaving a message, without doing anything except standing there and feeling the weight of my choices settle on my shoulders like a lead blanket. Over the next week, I threw myself into work with an intensity that concerned even my most dedicated employees. I stayed at the office until midnight, took client calls at 6 a.m., buried myself in reports and investigations and anything that would keep my mind off Rebecca lying in that hospital bed. But the guilt followed me everywhere. It whispered when I was reviewing fraud cases, reminding me that someone's sister, someone's daughter was the person whose life I was methodically dissecting. It shouted when I came home to my beautiful house, pointing out that I had everything while Rebecca had nothing left but the will to die. The worst part was the media attention. Someone, probably Linda, though she denied it, had leaked the story to the local newspaper. "Local businesswoman's family drama turns deadly," read the headline, complete with photos of both of us. Mine was from the Forbes article, professional and confident. Rebecca's was her old employee ID photo from Morrison Industries, taken back when she still thought she was untouchable. The article painted me as either a hero or a villain, depending on who they interviewed. Some people praised me for holding thieves accountable, for refusing to let family loyalty override justice. Others called me cold-hearted, vindictive, a woman who valued money over blood. The comments section was brutal. People who didn't know either of us felt qualified to judge our entire family dynamic based on a 1,000-word newspaper article. Some called Rebecca a criminal who got what she deserved. Others called me a monster who drove my own sister to attempt suicide. Both perspectives felt wrong, incomplete. The truth was messier, more complicated than any headline could capture. On Friday afternoon, Linda called again. "She's awake," she said without preamble. "And she wants to see you." "I don't think that's a good idea." "Neither do I, but she's been asking for you since yesterday." The doctors think it might help her recovery if you two could have some kind of resolution. Resolution. As if 8 years of family destruction could be resolved with a single bedside conversation. What does she want to say to me? I don't know. Maybe you should ask her yourself. I drove to the hospital that evening, my hands sweating on the steering wheel. Rebecca was awake this time, sitting propped up against pillows, looking fragile but alert. The tubes were gone, replaced by a simple oxygen cannula. Mom and Dad were both there, flanking her bed like bodyguards. Sarah, Rebecca's voice was hoarse from the intubation. You came. Linda said you wanted to see me. She nodded slowly. I wanted to apologize. That wasn't what I'd expected. For what? For trying to make you responsible for my choices. For blaming you in that note. For making you feel like you drove me to this. She looked down at her hands, which were wrapped in bandages where the fourth had been. I was angry and scared and I lashed out at the easiest target. Rebecca, let me finish. Please. Her voice was stronger now. I did steal that money. I did lie about it, and I did let you take the blame for destroying the family when all you did was tell the truth. I've spent 8 years telling myself that you were wrong, that family should have protected me, that you should have kept quiet. She looked up at me, and for the first time in decades, I saw something genuine in her eyes instead of calculation. But lying here, thinking I was going to die, all I could think about was how different things might have been if I'd listened to you that first time you caught me. If I'd stopped and made it right instead of getting angry and defensive. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Mom was crying again, silent tears that she didn't bother to wipe away. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Rebecca continued. I know I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that you were right. About the stealing, about the consequences, about everything. And I'm sorry it took me 8 years and a bottle of pills to figure that out. I felt something break loose in my chest, some knot of anger and resentment that I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. I never wanted you to hurt yourself, Rebecca. I wanted you to change, to be better, but not this. I know. And that's on me, not you. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of 8 years of anger and hurt and misunderstanding settling between us like dust after an explosion. What happens now? I asked finally. Now I get help. Real help. Therapy, medication if I need it, maybe some kind of rehabilitation program. She looked tired, older than her 32 years. And I figure out how to build a life that doesn't depend on taking shortcuts or expecting other people to clean up my messes. And us? Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. I don't know if there can be an us again, Sarah. We've both changed too much, hurt each other too deeply. But maybe we don't have to be enemies anymore. It wasn't forgiveness, and it wasn't a happy family reunion. But it was something. A ceasefire, maybe. A recognition that we were both human beings who'd made choices and lived with the consequences. I stayed for another hour, talking carefully about neutral topics, her treatment plan, my work, the weather. Mom and Dad mostly stayed quiet, but I could see them watching us, maybe hoping for some miracle reconciliation that wasn't going to come. When I left, Rebecca caught my hand. Sarah? Thank you. For coming. For not letting me get away with blaming you for this. I squeezed her fingers gently. Get better, Rebecca. Really better this time. Walking out of that hospital, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Not happy, exactly, but relieved. Like I'd been holding my breath for 8 years and could finally exhale. The guilt was still there, I don't think it will ever completely go away. But it was different now, more manageable. I'd never be able to undo the choices I'd made, the report I'd written, the consequences I'd set in motion. But I could live with them, knowing that Rebecca understood why I'd done what I'd done. 3 months later, I got a card in the mail, not for Christmas or my birthday, just a random Tuesday in March. The front was a simple photo of a sunrise, and inside, Rebecca had written, Day 127 sober. Day 89 in therapy. Day 1 of my new job at the community center, helping kids with their homework. It's minimum wage and I love it. Thank you for not visiting me in the hospital again, I needed to figure this out on my own. Maybe someday we can be sisters again. Until then, I hope you're happy. You deserve to be. I kept the card on my refrigerator for weeks, reading it every morning with my coffee. It wasn't an ending, exactly, but it felt like the beginning of something new. Something that might, eventually, look like peace. The media attention died down after Rebecca's recovery became old news. The business continued to thrive, if anything, The publicity had brought in new clients who appreciated working with someone willing to stand by their principles even when it cost them personally. But the most surprising change was in my relationship with my parents. Dad started calling occasionally, awkward, stilted conversations about work and weather that carefully avoided anything too personal. Mom sent Christmas and birthday cards, tentative overtures towards some kind of reconciliation. I didn't rush into anything. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild, if it can be rebuilt at all. But for the first time in 8 years, the possibility existed. And Rebecca was right about one thing: I did deserve to be happy. We all did, in our own complicated, imperfect ways. The security system still monitors my house every night, and I still listen for unexpected cars in the driveway. Some habits die hard. But these days, when I hear an engine after dark, it's more likely to be a friend stopping by than a family member coming to demand something from me. I've learned to tell the difference between the two. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them, and mine came on a rainy Thursday evening in late April, almost a year after Rebecca's hospitalization. I was working late again, some things never change, when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Sarah? It's Mom." Her voice was different. Smaller. Scared in a way I'd never heard before, not even during the worst of Rebecca's crisis. "What's wrong?" I asked, already reaching for my car keys. "It's your father. He had a heart attack this afternoon. We're at St. Mary's." The irony wasn't lost on me, the same hospital where Rebecca had fought for her life, now hosting another family medical emergency. Some locations seem to collect our traumas, don't they? How bad? I was already in the elevator, heading for the parking garage. "They don't know yet. He's in surgery." "Sarah, I know things have been complicated between us, but I didn't know who else to call. Rebecca's at work, and I'm on my way." The drive to the hospital was a blur of rain-slicked streets and racing thoughts. Dad was only 62, young for a heart attack, but not unheard of. The stress of the past year, the early retirement, the family drama. All of it could have contributed. I found Mom in the cardiac surgery waiting room, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. She'd aged dramatically in the past year, the toll of Rebecca's suicide attempt and our fractured family dynamics etched into every line on her face. "Any news?" I asked, settling into the uncomfortable plastic chair beside her. "Still in surgery. They said it could be hours." She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure. After everything. He's still my father, Mom. Whatever else has happened between us." We sat in silence for a while, surrounded by the familiar sounds of hospital life, hushed conversations, squeaking gurneys, the occasional overhead page for doctor this or doctor that. It occurred to me that this was the most time Mom and I had spent alone together in 8 years. "Rebecca's doing well," she said suddenly, as if reading my thoughts. "At her job, I mean. The kids at the community center love her. She's different now. Calmer. More honest about things." I nodded. "I'm glad. She talks about you sometimes. Wonders how you're doing, whether you're happy." Mom twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit I remembered from childhood. "She misses you. We all do." The admission hung between us like a bridge neither of us was quite ready to cross. 8 years of silence and hurt couldn't be erased with a few words in a hospital waiting room, but maybe it was a start. "I miss you too," I said quietly, and meant it. "All of you. Even when I was angriest, even when I told myself I was better off without you, I missed having a family." Mom started crying then, not the dramatic sobs from our confrontation at my house, but quiet tears of relief and regret. "I should have called you years ago. Should have tried to fix things instead of letting pride and stubbornness keep us apart. We all made mistakes, Mom. But I'm the mother. I should have been better." Before I could respond, a surgeon in scrubs appeared in the doorway, looking tired but not devastated, which I took as a good sign. "Mrs. Matthews? Your husband is stable. We were able to clear the blockage and restore blood flow to the affected area. He's going to be fine, but he'll need significant lifestyle changes and ongoing cardiac rehabilitation." The relief was overwhelming. Mom sagged in her chair, and I found myself reaching for her hand, a gesture that would have been unthinkable just hours before. "Can we see him?" Mom asked. "He's still sedated, but you can sit with him. Just family for now." The surgeon looked at me questioningly, and Mom spoke up before I could. "This is Sarah, our daughter. Our daughter." Not our other daughter or Rebecca's sister or any of the careful qualifications that had defined my relationship to this family for so long. Just their daughter. Dad looked pale and fragile in the recovery room, connected to more machines than I'd ever seen outside of Rebecca's ICU stay. But his breathing was strong and steady, and the monitors showed stable vital signs. "He's going to be okay," Mom whispered, more to herself than to me. "Yeah, he is." I pulled up a chair on the other side of his bed. "Stubborn as he is, it'll take more than a heart attack to keep him down." We stayed there for hours, talking quietly about inconsequential things, the weather, hospital food, how uncomfortable the chairs were. Normal conversation, the kind of meaningless small talk that families take for granted until they don't have it anymore. When Dad woke up the next morning, the first thing he saw was both of us sitting beside his bed. His eyes moved from Mom to me and back again, confusion and surprise flickering across his face. "Sarah?" His voice was hoarse from the breathing tube. "Hi, Dad. You came." "Of course I came." He closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them again, there were tears. "I thought I might never see you again. After everything." "Well," I said, echoing his own words from so many years ago, "you're stuck with me. Whether you like it or not." He smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him since I was 16 years old. Recovery is a slow process, whether it's from surgery or from years of family dysfunction. But sitting there in that hospital room, watching my parents sleep in uncomfortable chairs because they didn't want to leave each other's side, I realized that some things are worth the work it takes to rebuild them. Not everything. Not always. But sometimes, if you're lucky and stubborn enough, you get a second chance to be the family you should have been all along.